Good morning, everyone. We're going to get going. Welcome to the Budget Committee meeting of October 21st. We have a busy day of presentations, and so we're going to get going. I do have regrets from Councillor Longo this morning. And are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? I don't see any. Then I'm going to get us right to item 5.1, which is the 2026 operating and capital budget. And I'm going to provide Jane Closey the podium for opening remarks. And she's going to stand right next to the blue ball cap over there. That's our mascot for the day. And I look forward to all your information.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Chair Adams and the Budget Committee. So I am pleased to introduce the 2026 budget today. In June, the Mayor, of course, had asked us in consultation with the Budget Committee to prepare a budget with an overall tax rate increase of 3.5. The budget being presented over the next couple of days actually reflect months of hard work from staff, probably over the last year, who have developed thoughtful and realistic projections to support our growing Oakville. The services funded through this budget touch our lives every day, from the roads we drive on, the sidewalks we walk through, the trails we walk on, the stormwater system that protects our homes, the parks, the fire stations, the transit, and the recreational facilities that we all rely on, and which support or attract businesses to this community. These investments help make Oakville a vibrant and livable community for all of us. We're looking ahead with confidence. Our capital reserve balance remains strong in the current year, and the 10-year capital forecast will remain strong, supported by the introduction of the stormwater fee, which you'll hear from Jonathan later on. And of course, in part, given the provincial grant funding received when we met our housing targets. These measures allow us to plan responsibly and sustainably for Oakville over the very long term. In preparing the budget, staff, we're directed to find $600,000 in efficiency savings across the 2026 and 2027 budgets as directed by Council last year. Identifying savings is a regular part of our business process. It's something that we look at each and every year. The savings come from a form of direct cost reductions actually to the base. Efficiencies are cost savings that we look at, and cost avoidance measures for the future. All of these things help offset the rising cost and expenses that you experience each year. I'm pleased to report that we are on track on meeting the directions of Council that you established in 2025. There are within this budget $397,000 in cost reductions that have been identified for the 2026 budget. The remaining will be achieved in 2027 to make up the full $600,000 that was requested last year. Staff will also highlight additional efficiencies as part of our commitment to a strong financial management that's driven by a philosophy of continuous improvement that we undertake in each and every year. So I'm incredibly proud, I have to say, of the team and the work they've done in continuing to deliver high-quality services while staying within the budget directions set by the Mayor. You will, over the next 2 days, hear from each of the 4 commissioners, the CAO office, and our Director of Asset Management, who has accomplished amazing things with the work that's been done based on their data analytics. So I'd now like to pass it over to our Director of Finance, Jonathan Vanderheiden, who will walk you through the budget in much more detail. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane, and thanks, Chair Adams. Wondering if we can possibly bring up my presentation this morning. All right, I think we're good to go. All right, so good morning to members of Budget Committee. I'm excited to be here this morning to provide an overview for you of the 2026 staff prepared draft budget for the town of Oakville. I have a little bit of an agenda here to organize the various budget topics that we're going to be talking about this morning, and I'll go through each one in detail. And our first area of focus is going to be on our budget process, and a reminder of the things that we do here at the town of Oakville in building out our budget each year. So first up on the screen is the timeline and approval process that we use here at the town, and this is for the public portion of the budget. And I'm going to go through this slide in a bit of detail just to make sure that members of Budget Committee and the public are aware of where we are in the budget process and what our next steps are. And then as I do that, I'll go through a little bit of commentary on what we do internally with the budget as well. So this budget process is actually quite similar to the process we've used for the past couple of years, and it's based on the strong mayor legislation. This approach means that we have a staff prepared budget, and then the mayor will table his budget later on in the process. And consistent with prior years, we have a number of opportunities for public consultation throughout the process, and I know that's something that's important to council. And these items can be seen with the gold bordered frame on some of these boxes on the screen. And if you direct your attention to the first box in this flowchart, you can see that the external budget process kicks off with the budget forecast report that we provided to you as Budget Committee back in June. However, internally, the budget process is already underway at this point. In spring, asset management starts working with the departments on their infrastructure renewal projects, and the departments also begin working on their business cases. Throughout the summer, finance, in conjunction with the asset management team, meet with departments to talk about their budgets, their work plans, and upcoming projects. This work takes a fair bit of effort as we try to build as accurate and realistic a budget as possible, utilizing past experience and upcoming expectations about our program levels and outcomes, as well as council's strategic priorities. During this time, members of the Budget Committee had the opportunity to consult with residents on the budget, and you can see that in the first gold bordered box in the top row. As part of that process, there was a Budget Committee meeting on September 24th, where you as committee provided some questions and feedback to staff for the 2026 budget. Appendix B to the staff report on today's agenda contains a summary of those questions and the approach staff has taken in answering them. Some answers are provided by way of an additional appendix, while others will be referred to throughout the presentations. We have also included in Appendix B any budget referrals that came our way from previous meetings of council. So during the month of September and into early October, staff are extremely busy working on the staff prepared budget. The finance team, along with members of the town's management team, directors, and commissioners, work through each department's budget, evaluating the assumptions, considering various initiatives, and looking at the capital forecast. The finance team then compiles everything together to present to the executive leadership team for their review and their consideration, as not every request can be considered. Once everything has been finalized, staff work on pulling it together in the budget book, which is available to you, and I see some of you have it on your desks already in front of you, and that's also available to the public on our website today too. During this time, our commissioners are also pulling together their presentations, which you'll see following my presentation and on Thursday. And so that brings us to the next row in our chart, which involves more public consultation. Following the budget presentations this week, Budget Committee members have the opportunity to hear from residents on the draft budget. This can be done individually by each councillor. However, there are also two specific meetings that have been set aside to hear from members of the public, and you can see that on the next gold bordered box. Residents or community groups are invited to come and share their thoughts on the budget. In keeping with our meeting procedures, we do ask that they register for these meetings, and they're being held on November 11th in the evening and November 13th in the morning. These two meetings are also an opportunity for members of council to inquire of staff on anything related to the budget. Now, I did skip over the green bordered box that's on this row. So during the week of November 3, we are offering 3 sessions for you as councillors to come to Town Hall to meet with members of our leadership team and talk about the budget. We've timed this a couple of weeks after the presentations and the release of the budget book so that you have time to digest all the information that we present and give to you. Our hope with these sessions is that it will give you the opportunity to ask any questions you might have, or seek any clarity that you might need as you look at the budget and as you engage with residents on it. And of course, you will still have the opportunity to ask any questions in a public forum at the Budget Committee meetings as well. So if you haven't already signed up for one of those sessions, please take a look at the calendar and let us know which session you'd like to attend. So now if we move to the last box in the middle row, you'll see that we have the final meeting of the Budget Committee on November 27th. At this meeting, staff will report back on anything else that we have been asked, and then the committee will have the opportunity to pull together their own thoughts along with those they've heard from residents and provide any recommendations to the mayor before he releases his budget. And that brings us to December 4th. So as you can see on the slide in front of you, the mayor will present his budget at the proposed council, or at the special council meeting on December 4th. You'll notice that these items in the last row are all in dark blue, as this part of the process is done with full council. 1 week later, on December 11th, there is a special council meeting where council can receive additional public delegations on the mayor's proposed budget. And then finally, in the last box in this chart, we have a council meeting on December 15th where the 2026 proposed budget will be considered. And so I'm going to move to the next slide where we're going to outline very briefly what could happen at that meeting and what the next steps may be at that time. So this is a slide on the budget decision flow chart. And we've created this a couple of years ago with the strong mayor legislation coming in. And the process is relatively straightforward, but I do think it's good to touch on so that everyone's aware of it. The flow chart works by following the gold arrows in yes situations and the blue arrows in no situations. So beginning at the top, we see that the head of council is to provide a proposed budget, and this is what the mayor is planning to do on December 4th, and this starts the clock ticking on some of the timelines that are in the legislation. Once the mayor presents his budget, council has 30 days within which to pass any resolutions to make amendments to the budget. We have a council meeting on December 15th, which is when council could propose any such resolutions. And I would like to point out that that is technically less than the 30-day maximum. We're quite confident that the process provides the opportunity to consider any resolutions before the end of the year. At that meeting, if council does not pass any resolutions to amend the budget would be deemed adopted. Staff would request that council close the budget amendment process, and then the process would be complete for 2026 with the mayor's budget being adopted. If council did pass any resolutions to amend the budget, we move to the next set of boxes. The mayor then has the opportunity, within 10 days, to exercise his veto power on any of these amendments. If he opts not to exercise his veto, then the budget would be deemed adopted as amended by council. If the mayor does utilize his veto, then within 15 days at the end of the veto period, council may vote to override the mayor's veto, requiring a 2/3 majority vote to do so. If council does override the mayor's veto, then the budget would be adopted, including council's amendments. If council does not override the mayor's veto, then the budget would be adopted without the amendments vetoed by the mayor. And so I should be clear about one more thing on this chart. It is a little bit simplistic. In a situation where council proposes numerous amendments and the mayor accepts some while vetoing others, the amendments that everyone agrees to would be adopted regardless of how council override goes. All right, so now that we've talked about timelines and approvals, I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about the process that we use in building the town's annual budget and the principles that guide our approach. So as you well know, council sets various strategic priorities to guide and shape the organization, and these have an impact on how, where, and when we spend funds. The budget book is structured in alignment with council's strategic plan, and you'll see more about that in the coming slides as well as in the commissioner presentations. Another factor in building the budget is the direction that we receive as staff from the mayor and as endorsed by the rest of council. Earlier this year, Mayor Burton directed staff on some key parameters in building the staff-prepared draft budget, and I have a separate slide that outlines those that I'll refer to in a moment. Next, the town uses PB2 methodology, that is performance-based, program-based budgeting. So one of the questions that was posed by the budget committee meeting, or at the budget committee meeting on September 24th, was about PB2 versus zero-based budgeting. And so I've also got a slide on that will come up in a couple of slides. Our fourth bullet is for service levels. We build our budget around maintaining services and service levels that are valued by our residents. From time to time, this necessitates changes to various programs which can have a budgetary impact. Sound financial position. The town's finances have been well managed, and as a result, the town is in a sound financial position. Our capital and stabilization reserves currently exceed the recommended levels from the Government Finance Officers Association, and the town's debt levels are within both the provincial and internal limits. As we evaluate capital budget considerations, it's important to consider the impact that these projects will have on reserve and debt levels and allow us to maintain our strong financial position. Included as a staff report for today's meeting is a comprehensive summary of the town's various reserves. As you'll see in that report, while our stabilization and capital reserve levels are currently strong, some of our equipment reserves are struggling, and the long-term forecast for our capital reserve is showing a notable decrease. I will touch on our reserves in more detail later. However, for this slide, the important thing to keep in mind is that building out the budget requires us to keep one eye on the current service levels and tax rates, and the other eye on the long-term financial stability of the organization to make sure that our choices and decisions consider both impacts. Infrastructure in a state of good repair and asset management. So infrastructure is a critical element of the town and our ability to deliver services that residents need and rely upon. The town has over $4 billion of infrastructure under its control, and it's very important that we take good care of it. The town has established a corporate asset management plan and is continuing to build our asset management culture. Asset management and the corporate asset management team play a big role in helping to establish the budget. The team works with departments to evaluate capital and operating requests and needs, taking risk and whole life cycle costing perspectives to determine the best way to prioritize the various requests. Following my presentation here today, Catherine Hewitson, our Director of Asset Management, will be providing a presentation of the work her team has done to help build out this year's budget. Growth. As the town continues to grow, this has an impact on the town's budget. This impacts us on the capital side with new projects that need to be completed, and these are primarily funded by development charges. It also impacts us on the operating side as we need to consider the operating impacts of these projects and, ideally, match that with the growth that we are seeing on the assessment roll. And again, I'll speak more to this item later on. And finally, we've added the Municipal Act to this slide for this year. During the budget consultation process, staff were asked about the differences between the audited financial statements and the annual budget. Staff have prepared an appendix to address this question, but very quickly I'd like to say that while both of these are very important documents to the town, they are prepared under two different sets of rules for two different purposes. The data included in both comes from the same sources. However, their unique presentation requirements, governed by things like the Municipal Act, result in documents that can look very different. All right, as I mentioned a few moments ago, we were asked this year about zero-based budgeting. I am by no means an expert on zero-based budgeting, but we have prepared a brief summary contrasting the two budgeting approaches for you today. So zero-based budgeting simply refers to starting each budget at $0 and then justifying each item, primarily your expenses, that you would add to the budget. So I'm going to use emergency services as an example as we go through this. So in zero-based budgeting, this would involve fire management explaining each year why they need X number of fire stations staffed by Y number of firefighters costing Z number of dollars. So while an approach like that could be utilized to ensure that all spending is required for each year, it's extremely time-consuming and resource-consuming, and it requires a longer budget process. It can also lead to a focus on short-term objectives rather than long-term ones. A couple of other concerns with this approach are that the town's service levels are already well established, and that contracts or agreements, think of something like our collective agreements, extend well beyond 1 year. So using this approach would disregard those considerations. In contrast, PB2 methodology, or performance-based program-based budgeting, is different. In the town's PB2, we focus on programs rather than departments, and we have an emphasis on the allocation of resources based on desired outcomes and the measurement of program results against those desired outcomes. By focusing on outcomes, it more easily aligns with the organization's objectives and how well the budget investments support those objectives. So again, using emergency services as an example, this allows us to demonstrate how our investments, both short and long term, in fire services is supporting things like response time or injuries per 100,000 residents or other metrics like that. And these can all be tied back to our desire to have a vibrant and livable community. All right, council strategic priorities. So a few minutes ago, I mentioned that strategic priorities set by council are one of our budget principles. As you can see here, these are the key areas of focus for council, arranged into 4 different groups or buckets, all connected with the town's vision to be a vibrant and livable community for all. As members of council, you're probably more aware of these 4 strategic priority areas, but I think it's a good reminder to list them out here, and they are growth management, community belonging, environmental sustainability, and accountable government. As we move on to the next slide, you'll see how we've grouped each of our programs under one of these areas to help connect the budget with council's strategic priorities. So as you can see here, and this is also on page 7 of the budget book that you have, the priority areas match the previous slide with the various town programs listed underneath. Finance has worked with our strategic group to arrange our budget book so that it is organized in a similar manner to the key focus areas. I'd also like to point out that growth management here is not the same as the capital growth projects that you'll see later in this presentation. This category refers to how we manage growth across the town, whereas the growth projects later on refer to those specific projects driven by growth within the town. And I do want to stress that difference to avoid any confusion as we go through the presentations. And we're also going to come back to these groupings in a little bit to show how the budget spending is grouped by key priority area. All right, as I mentioned earlier, one of the key variables that we need to consider is the direction staff receives from the mayor as it relates to the budget. Earlier this year, the mayor provided direction to guide in building the staff-prepared draft budget, and there were 5 key parts to the directive as it relates to the 2026 budget, and these are displayed on the screen. The first direction was that we continue to use PB2 budgeting and arrive at an overall increase of up to 3.5%, while incorporating council's strategic plan priorities. And I should also note that this direction is a decrease from the forecasted figure of 3.97% that we discussed back in June. The second was a directive to OPL for their budget submission. OPL is a separate legal entity, and so the budget process is a little unique for the library, and providing them specific direction makes it a bit easier for their board and senior management team to have a target to aim for as they look at their budget. The target this year was the same as the town, with an understanding that the remaining increases for 16 Mile needed to be included as well. Thirdly, the mayor directed staff to take a long-term view for financial sustainability and the use of the capital levy. The focus on ensuring long-term financial sustainability is aligned with council's strategic priorities that we touched on a few slides ago. The capital levy refers to one of the key funding sources that we have in our budget structure here at the town, and I'll touch more on this later on in the presentation. The fourth directive was to ensure that our services remain as they are and that our fee recoveries are in line with our user fee policy. And finally, the last directive for the 2026 budget speaks to the importance of public consultation through the process, something that I know is important to council. So throughout the upcoming presentations, you will see some responses to feedback we've heard from the community as it pertains to the budget. So one final variable that we need to consider as the town, as we look at our budget process, is that we are a lower tier municipality. So the town share of the overall tax levy budget is about 44% or 44 cents on the dollar, with the region and the province making up the remainder. This means that any changes that they may have will have an impact on the overall tax levy increase, and we need to consider this. And this year we've also been asked to show the HRPS portion as well. All right, so now that we've talked about our budget process, we're going to switch gears a little bit and actually talk about the details in the 2026 operating budget. So we're going to start by looking at the budget overall, and then we're going to go into more detail on the operating section itself. The $803 million that you see here is the full investment that is proposed to be made next year in the town of Oakville. And this is for ongoing services and for capital projects. The operating budget is $462 million, and the capital budget is $341 million, leaving us with a net property tax levy of just shy of $300 million. As we move to the next slide, you'll see how this is broken down into the strategic priorities set by council. So if you think back to a couple slides ago when we had the key areas of focus for council across the top, you'll see that those headings have been reproduced here. And the numbers under each key area reflect the planned investments that the town is making in that category in this year's budget. We do this both for the operating investments in the first row, our capital investments in the second row, and then we also show the total investment by category as well as the tax levy impact in the last row. And you'll notice that the tax levy impact is much smaller than the gross amount, as the gross amount includes items that are funded from other sources such as user fees, reserves, grants, etc. In the commissioner presentations following my presentation today and later this week, you'll hear much more about the many programs and initiatives under each of these key focus areas. However, I'd like to take a moment to highlight a couple of key budget items in each area just for your awareness. So our investments in growth management include funds for a North Ops depot and various road projects, including active transportation. For community belonging, there are funds for the construction of a new central library as part of the downtown cultural hub, as well as funds for the ability to purchase land for a future Trafalgar Urban Core South Community Center. Under environmental sustainability, there are investments for parks and stormwater management. And under accountable government, many of these investments are for the behind-the-scenes work that happens here at the town, including things like IT costs. So before I leave this slide, I do want to include a couple of reminders. One, this chart, or at least the operating portion of this chart, won't match the totals from the previous slide, as we do remove the corporate items as they don't naturally fit into any of these categories, and I'll have a separate slide on the corporate items later. The second thing is that some of our projects could fit in more than one category, but for simplicity, we only include them in one category in our budget book. And finally, a similar chart can be found in the executive summary of the budget book on page 6. And the pages after that also break out some of the key initiatives in each key focus area. All right, so now we're going to move to the tax levy impact of this year's proposed budget. So I'm going to start with a high-level summary of the impacts for our residents and taxpayers, and then move into some more details on the specific drivers for this year's budget. So the total tax levy proposed in the budget is $297 million, and this represents a $15 million increase overall, and an $11 million increase after adjusting for growth, and that's compared to the figures in last year's budget. On a percentage increase for existing residents, the town share is just under a 4% increase, and as part of the entire tax bill before adding in, or after adding in the region education shares, this works out to a 3.50% increase, which is in line with the council endorsed mayoral direction. These figures may change based upon any decisions made by council and the mayor. All right, this brings us to our budget drivers slide, and this chart can be found in our the budget overview section of our budget book on page 12. And I know that it has a lot of information on it, but it does capture some of the key drivers for changes in this year's operating budget. And so I'm going to walk you through each factor and do my best to explain how each driver impacts the town's 2026 budget. So before we jump into that, just as a reminder of the columns that go across the top, the first column is for the budget drivers, the things that impact the budget. The second column at the bottom shows the split between the town's portion of the tax bill along with that of the region of education. The third column has the increase in actual dollars in millions, while the fourth column has the percentage change on the town's tax levy, followed by the percentage change on the tax bill itself. The last column is what that impact means for $100,000 of assessment, and we add this to help residents gain an understanding of what the budget would mean to their property. So now I'll go through each budget driver and talk about each one a little bit. So first up, we have our inflationary impacts. This line reflects changes to the existing base budget that provides for the same level of service as in the previous year. The largest driver is for personnel increases for our labor costs. And in addition, here's where we have the impact for the rising costs of materials, supplies, and services for our operations. This line also includes increases to the transit equipment reserve and the building maintenance reserve, to ensure that we are setting aside funds for the cost of these assets and the impact it has on reserves. Offsetting some of these cost increases are increases to the town's revenue sources, including an increase to our investment income, tax penalties and interest, as well as changes in revenue from increasing user fees in line with our user fee policy. This line also reflects savings that are identified by the departments as they review their budgets for budget submission. Growth and capital. So this category captures the additions to the operating budget of new growth and new capital projects. Each year as we go through the budget process, we also identify any increased costs related to growth or to bring new capital projects into operations. This is a routine driver, but the amount does vary each year depending on the nature of the projects and growth. So of the $5.5 million that you see on screen there, $2.9 million is from transit, mostly related to the operating costs for new drivers for the expanded fleet, and the remainder is related to the remaining impacts of opening 16 Mile Sports Complex, as well as a number of smaller projects and impacts. So now we'll talk about items that are added to the budget to address Council's strategic priorities. So to help describe this in more detail, I have 4 charts that break out these $1.23 million in additions, one for each quadrant of the strategic plan. The items that you'll see on these slides are not specific action items from the strategic plan. However, they do relate to the specific priority areas identified by Council and will enable the town to address these key topics for the long term. So the first one up is growth management, which has a total investment of $1.3 million for a net tax levy impact of $255,000 for 2026. And I should point out a couple of items on this slide and the 3 that are going to follow it. So each slide is just a brief summary of what has been added. More details can be found in the commissioner presentations and the budget book itself. And I would ask if you have questions on any specific item here, just maybe hold it until after the commissioner presentations, as they may actually address it in their presentation. Secondly, this is not a ranked list. These are not in any particular order. And then third, for many of the full-time positions, the planned start date is not January 1st. So the figure included in the budget reflects the expected start date. Any remaining impact to annualize the position will be included in the 2027 budget. And then finally, we've included both the total investment column and the tax levy impact column, as some items are funded by the tax levy, while others are partially or entirely funded by fees or recoveries from capital or stabilization funding. So just want to put those caveats on for this slide and the next couple as well. So the next group was for community belonging, which has an investment of just over $500,000 and a tax levy impact of $313,000. This category also includes a continuation of the film pilot program funded by the Tax Stabilization Reserve. Environmental sustainability, we have an investment here of $278,000, but only a tax levy impact of $65,000, and that's due to the reduction in part-time positions because it's a conversion. And finally, we have accountable government, which has a $1.2 million in total investment, about half of which is funded by the tax levy. And a good deal of this work is done for things that are behind the scenes, and Commissioner Ayers will speak more about this in her presentation. All right, back to our budget drivers chart. So the next line is called annualization of items approved in prior years, and this is for items that we added in last year's budget. And as I mentioned a moment ago, when we add items to the budget, whether that's positions or service contracts, they often don't start exactly on January 1st. So as a result, we only include the amount we need for that first year, and then we have to pick up the remaining portion in the next year to ensure that we annualize that item. All right, our next line up is Oakville Public Library. As part of the mayor's budget direction, he has provided a specific target to OPL to assist them in planning for their budget. As a separate legal entity, giving them an overall target like this allows them to balance their various needs and pressures within one envelope. So for 2026, the target for OPL was 3.5%, plus the remaining impacts of opening 16 Mile. So the $1.01 million figure identified on this line represents the amount of that 3.5% envelope for the library's operating budget that has been added to the overall budget, along with the remaining impacts of growth for 16 Mile. So our next line is actually a negative line on the chart, and that indicates that it's additional revenue coming into our budget to help reduce the impact to the tax levy. Growth in our assessment base never perfectly matches the timing of our increase in costs. However, we do try as much as possible to match them to avoid fluctuations in the tax levy increase. In previous years, we've had extra growth that was not needed, and therefore we saved it for when we knew there would be operating impacts, specifically the opening of the new community center at 16 Mile and the expansion of our transit fleet. This helps to soften the blow of adding lots of new operating costs in 1 year. Capital levy. So the town has a long-standing practice of taking 1% of the prior year's total tax levy amount and adding that to our capital envelope. This is a very valuable tool that allows us to finance the various capital projects that the town undertakes. In a few slides, you'll see more about our capital levy and capital reserve and the importance of this funding source. So when you add that all up together, that brings our base operating budget to a total increase of just over $15 million, or 5.47%. So now we come to a couple of lines related to efficiencies. In the 2025 budget, Council directed staff to find $600,000 in efficiency savings over the next two budgets and incorporate tax stabilization funding in the 2025 budget to reflect this. Later in the presentation, I'll have a more detailed slide of how we got to the figure you see here. However, what this represents is that staff have identified almost $400,000 of those requested efficiencies in the current year budget, and therefore we have also removed an equal amount of tax stabilization funding. So as those two amounts are the same, the total of $15 million to this point remains unchanged. However, this number is reduced due to assessment growth that we have added for this year. So assessment growth reflects the additional properties being added to the roll, which were not included in the prior year's budget. This is a regular budget driver, though the amount of growth does fluctuate, and this year's assessment growth is over $4 million. I also want to add that I'm hopeful that before any budget deliberations, we might have an updated figure from MPAC. However, any extra room would likely need to be saved for future years to match with the cost of growth in keeping with the town's practice. So that's the end of the budget drivers. So as it stands now, before any other adjustments, the overall tax increase to existing residents is $11.19 million, or 3.97% of the town's tax levy. And then when you add in the expected regional and education portions, and I don't know if you can see it on your screens in front of you, the way it's set up, but the total increase does come in at 3.50%, which is in line with what council requested of staff. So another way to visualize this is a breakdown of what $100 in town taxes would be spent on by major program area. And this chart is taken from page 9 of our budget book. And you can see that infrastructure renewal, which represents our capital levy and our corporate budgeted transfers to reserves, has the largest share at $21, followed by emergency services, transit, and then the road network. And these amounts are very consistent on a year-over-year basis. So at this moment, I'd like to take a quick pause and address one of the other questions that we received from Budget Committee, and that is, what are the options to reduce the overall property tax levy below 3.5%? So to begin with, this would need to come as a directive from Budget Committee. Staff were asked to prepare a draft budget based on the council-endorsed mayoral direction of 3.5%, which, given inflation over the past couple of years, was needed to address inflation pressures and the components of the town's strategic plan. And the strategic plan itself is another factor that would need to be weighed against a lower increase. Reducing the 2026 budget would necessitate the need to adjust, modify, or push out key elements of council's strategic plan. Finally, a reduction may also involve the need to consider service level reviews to reduce town services for residents. So if you look at the slide in front of you here, this would mean that we would need to reduce the investment we're making in one or more of these areas. All right, as part of the operating budget overview, I'd like to say a few words about the corporate revenues and expenses. I'm not going to go through each row on this chart. It does come straight from the budget book. It's in tab 29. But I do want to point out a couple of things. So on the personnel side, we have made an update to the budget. As any employer, we experience what we call gapping when staff leave a position and we need to find a replacement. So more information can be found about gapping in Appendix P. But one change we've made this year is to put some of the gapping that has previously included here in the corporate expense section and moved it out to each department as a percentage of total wages. And so we've done this to better match our program expenses, keeping in line with PB2 budgeting, and to avoid the appearance of savings in programs when there are budgeted adjustments already in the corporate section. For purchase services, this includes the cost for our WSIB amounts, which we have had to increase by $300,000. I do want to state that this is not because we're an unsafe employer. Rather, this is specifically related to the legislation for presumptive claims for emergency services. And so we also update the impact on their budget in their program in the budget book as well. On the payments and grants row, much of this number is for debt charges, over $13.5 million. And similar to the interest earnings that I'll talk about in a minute, all our debt charges are recorded through our corporate revenues and expenses. So this means that the debt charges here are listed as an expense. However, any non-tax funding for this debt, think of DC charges, will come through on the revenues, which you'll see in the next slide. And so this number has gone up by almost $740,000 this year. And then finally, we have a row called internal expenses and transfers. And this line is used primarily for our transfers to reserves. So we've got almost $50 million for the capital levy, $14 million for our capital reserve, $11 million for our hydro dividend, $22 for interest earnings, and there's a number of other transfers as well. And so following corporate expenses, we have corporate revenues. And again, I'm not going to talk about each item in here, but just touch on a couple. So we have increased the revenue we're expecting to see from payments in lieu of taxes as this figure has been growing. But perhaps more significantly, we've also increased the penalties and interest on taxes budget as well. And this can be seen in the fourth row on the chart. So this amount has been increased as we are starting to see more penalties from residents missing tax payments. It is our hope that as interest rates come back down, this trend will reverse, and it's something that we will keep council apprised of. Interest income is the next item to talk about. So similar to prior years, an important reminder here is that this reflects all of our expected interest income, much of which is transferred to the reserves that have the corresponding balances. We have increased the amount we expect to benefit the town's overall bottom line by $1.8 million, and that has served to help keep the town's tax levy increase down. Another item to touch on is the hydro dividend. One of the budget consultation questions asked about the amount of funding that the town receives from OEC, which is the parent company of Oakville Hydro. Based on the most recent projections from OEC, they are expecting to send a dividend to the town of $12.2 million, up from $6.1 million a couple of years ago. While most of these funds don't reduce the tax levy, we do put them in a reserve that we will use to fund the debt payments for currently the hospital contribution and in the future for the new downtown library. I should also note that the budget does not yet include any expected funds from Oakville MDC, as they are not yet at a stage to generate positive cash flows to dividend back to the town. The line below that is called fund transfers, and this refers to any funds we take from our reserves for specific purposes. If you think back to my comment a moment ago about DC debt payments coming in, this is where you would see those funds coming into the operating fund to pay for those debt charges. And finally, internal recoveries are one of the mechanisms that we use for our internal accounting. And so once you take a look at all the revenues and expenses in our corporate section, you'll see that the net impact of the tax levy is a cost of just over $32 million. Considering that our capital levy alone is about $50 million, this means that the various corporate revenue sources are offsetting the expenses and making a dent in the capital levy requirement from our taxpayers. All right, switching gears for a minute. One of the items that was raised at the last budget committee meeting was with regards to the town's efforts to find efficiencies in our operations to ensure that we are being diligent with the use of funds from the public. And this is something that's not new to us here at the town of Oakville. The slide on the screen in front of you is actually an old slide that we pulled from a previous budget presentation. That's why the format's a little bit different. It does highlight the various initiatives that the town has undertaken over the years, demonstrating the commitment of council and of staff to finding efficiencies in the work that we do. So the only part of this slide that's actually new is for the sentence at the side regarding the request from the 2025 budget for the 2026 and 2027 budgets. So that leads us to talking about efficiencies for this year and what's in the current budget. So before I get into the information that I'm going to show on screen to you, it's also important to note that our corporate strategic team also engages in lean initiatives throughout the organization. These do not always translate into direct savings, as sometimes it's more about cost avoidance or improved customer experience. So, this year, after the council direction from last year, CAO Clohessy created a working group with staff from corporate strategy, finance, and asset management. Key areas of focus were identified, 2 of which have been tackled this year. These included a review of the operating budget and a review of staffing as part of workforce planning. For the operating budget, our financial planning team met with the directors in each program area to identify areas of potential reductions by reviewing areas of the budget with regular underspending. This is actually an exercise that we do each year as part of the budget review to ensure that the budget reflects actual experience. However, this year we added a focus of looking for items where we have made specific changes to our operations that have resulted in efficiencies. $306,000 was identified this way and was focused on 4 key areas. A change in our IT approach for some solutions, a change in our pool chemical system, a reduction in in-office costs due to hybrid work, and a change in our advertising budget by using different methods. The commissioners will have more information on some of these efficiencies in their upcoming presentations. The second focus for this year's budget was a review of all vacant positions that have been gapped for an extended period of time. 4 key positions were identified and reviewed in detail. 3 of these positions were assessed as still being required to maintain the town's services. However, a 4th position was one in the CAO's office and has been removed from the budget in 2026, resulting in a savings of $91,000. So if you put that all together, the savings that staff have identified in this year's budget for efficiencies are $397,000, which leaves us with just over $200,000 to be found in next year's budget. Now, before I leave this slide, I do want to address one more topic related to efficiencies. So as part of the feedback from council and the public, we were asked to provide information on supply chain initiatives and activities and programs that we take advantage of here at the town. And so I'm happy to report that we actively explore and leverage collaborative purchasing opportunities through a variety of programs and supply chain initiatives. So this includes engaging with Supply Ontario, the GTHA Purchasing Group, and Halton Cooperative Purchasing Group, which is a group of similar organizations here in Halton Region. We do this as well as utilizing group purchasing organizations and cooperative procurement models. We also incorporate what are called piggyback clauses where appropriate, allowing us to benefit from existing contracts negotiated by other entities. These strategies help ensure that we are consistently identifying cost savings opportunities, streamlining procurement processes, and aligning with sector-wide best practices. So I do have a couple of examples to highlight for you. We utilize Supply Ontario for the acquisition of mobile devices, related services, and secure document and media destruction. We also leverage the City of Toronto's procurement contract for gasoline and diesel fuel. And through the Halton Cooperative Purchasing Group, we access competitive agreements for elevator maintenance, mat and mop rentals, and our purchasing card program. All right, this is the last slide on the 2026 operating budget, and this is the inflation slide that we showed you during the forecast presentations, but we've updated it a little bit. And it's a little bit busy, so I'll walk you through a couple of the lines that are on here. So the long dashed line that goes all the way back to 2009 is for inflation both past and projected. The solid blue line represents the town's tax increases over the same period of time. As you can see, our tax increases have historically stayed quite close to inflation, albeit with a bit of a lag at times. You'll notice that when inflation was at its peak, the tax increases were far below inflation, and now we've been playing some catch up. To help visualize that, we've added 2 5-year trend lines. The lighter of the 2 lines reflects the average inflation over the past 5 years, which is just over 3.5%. During the same time, the town's tax increases have averaged an increase of less than that at just over 3%, and that's the darker of those 2 lines. It looks like inflation has thankfully trended down, and I hope it will level off, though the Bank of Canada has created 2 separate inflation scenarios depending on tariff impacts. So we'll have to wait and see how things go. And I think there's a StatsCan announcement this morning coming out on inflation as well. Before I leave this slide, I did want to show point out the dotted green line that's on the right side. And this shows how the town's tax levy increase is projected to drop from last year. And so that's the end of our operating budget. And we're going to spend a couple of slides on the operating forecast. All right, so we're only considering for approval the 2026 operating budget, but it is important to look to the future. So this is again a busy chart, but it can be found on page 22 in the budget book. And it's similar to the current year budget driver chart, though with a few differences. So across the top, this chart shows the forecasted impact on the town's tax levy and the tax bill itself. And we do this for both 2027 and 2028. As you can see, there will be some pressures in next year's budget as the estimated tax increases are 3.75% in 2027 and 3.4% in 2028. While growth is one factor in this, we are also assuming to be able to use some of that deferred growth in next year's budget. And the pressures will also come from the annualization of some items approved in this budget, as well as some initiatives to address council's strategic priorities, which is the third line down. So there were a number of initiatives and positions that were identified during the current year's budget process that do contribute to council's strategic plan. However, they could not be accommodated in the current year. So we've included them here for 2027. And if I go to the next slide, you'll see them in more detail. And so this is the list of items that were not included in this year's budget, but have been included in the forecast. I know that this is hard to read, but the presentation is available if you want to take a look at it afterwards. The focus on sharing this slide with Budget Committee is to highlight that these items could not be accommodated this year, but are on the radar for consideration next year. And just a slight caution, similar to my note on the previous, the ones that were added in 2026, these items are not in any ranked order, they're just sorted alphabetically, so don't read into any ranking on this list. All right, that concludes my comments on the operating budget and forecast, and so I'm going to switch gears now to talk about capital. So our capital budget, we're going to focus on both the costs and how we pay for those costs. And this year's capital budget has a number of key initiatives and projects that total $341 million. So you can see that figure broken down here into the three categories that we use to organize the town's capital budget. I'll go through each of these captions here and touch on a couple of the key items. However, more details are available in the budget book and will be touched on by the commissioners in their presentations. So growth of $148 million. So this includes $38 million for the new Trafalgar Urban Core South land for a future community center, $6 million for various park developments, $23 million for North Ops Depot, and $58 million for the design and construction of various road projects, including $20 million for the North Service Road urbanization. Infrastructure renewal at $158 million includes $71 million for the construction of the new Central Library branch, $10 million for various park renewal projects, $3 million each for fire and roads and works vehicles and equipment, and $17 million for various bus replacements and refurbishments. And the last category is for program initiatives, which is for strategic projects that are not related directly to growth or infrastructure renewal. This year's budget has $36 million in projects, including $4 million each for Brawny Village and Lower Kerr Village streetscape work, $4.3 million for the lease related to our transit electric charging infrastructure, $10 million for stormwater drainage improvements, and $2 million for our traffic calming program. So this is the same information, but it's now been arranged by program. And I'm not going to go into much detail here as the commissioners will touch on it, some of the more significant items in their presentations. But I do think it provides a clear representation as to which program areas have the bulk of the capital spending. And a couple of specific notes for you. Last year, library was not even on this chart. However, the inclusion of the new library branch in this year's budget has jumped them up to the second largest program in this year's budget. And I'd also like to point out that we have about halfway down, we've got stormwater listed there. We've included it now as its own program in the budget, and you can see that in the list here. And I'll have more information on stormwater coming up, as well as Commissioner Fu will as well in her presentation. All right, well, that last slide focused on the spending. This slide focuses on where we will get the funds to pay for these capital projects. So as you can see on this slide, the capital levy and our capital reserves are our largest funding source for this year's capital budget. One of the questions that we received from public consultation was information about projects that are supported by our capital levy. So before I address that, I do want to give a bit of background on the capital levy. The capital levy was initiated by council in 1996, and it provides a significant funding source for the capital program. It's up to $50 million now. Since that time, council has maintained a 1% increase to the levy, allowing the levy to keep up with inflation and our growing infrastructure needs. The levy is a major reason for the strong financial position the town is in. In 2026, $2.2 million of the levy is used to fund tax-supported debt charges. Some of those are for the downtown Lakeshore reconstruction and the transit facility expansion. The remainder is used for many of the projects within both the infrastructure renewal and program initiative categories. Given that together, these two categories total over $190 million, that is to be expected. Another item that we were asked to speak to relates to major funding from other levels of government. So the 2026 capital budget includes $8.6 million in funding from the CCBF, that used to be called the federal gas tax. And that's for road projects, and we also have $1.6 million from the Ontario gas tax for transit buses. And more details about these two programs can be found in the reserve report that is also on today's agenda. I also have a few slides coming up on reserves, DCs, and debt, and more details about the funding of the capital budget can be found in our capital budget book on page 21. In addition, specific project details, including the funding, can be found in the capital detail sheets document that will be posted on the town's webpage. Capital forecast. This year's budget includes our 10-year capital forecast, which lists our projects from 2026 all the way to 2035. As the projects in the forecast are simply that, a forecast, we won't spend too much time on the details here. However, it is important to highlight for council and residents what the expectations are for the next 10 years when it comes to the capital projects and to funding them. So this is the same slide that I showed you a couple minutes ago, except now that it reflects the full 10-year capital forecast at $2.3 billion instead of just the 2026 portion. More information can be found on page 24 of the budget book, as well as in the commissioner presentations, but there are a couple things I'd like to highlight for you now. So growth is $1.1 billion, and that includes over $100 million for various recreation items, including community centers for Trafalgar, Urban Core South, and in Palermo, $80 million for parkland acquisition, and over $500 million for design and construction of various road projects. Infrastructure renewal of $955 million includes funds for various facility projects over $100 million worth, park renewal works of over $80 million, $100 million for the replacement of transit buses, and nearly $150 million for design and construction of road projects. And finally, program initiatives at $228 million in the forecast include several significant streetscape projects throughout the town, including in Bronte and Kerr, as well as Kelsa Gate. So this is the same data that I just showed you, but just organized by program now. We've included some colors to represent the different types of projects. So growth is in that yellow or gold bar, infrastructure renewals in blue, and program initiatives are in black. And we do this to show which program areas have a heavy growth focus versus infrastructure renewal. For growth items, much of this is for our road projects, and we need our DCs to pay for these. For our infrastructure renewal projects, this chart helps to highlight the importance of our asset management plan that Catherine will speak to shortly. And similar to what we just showed for the 2026 budget, or capital budget, this slide highlights where the funds will come from to pay for the $2.3 billion in upcoming projects. And there are a variety of sources, though most of the funding does come from either DCs or through the town's capital reserve. And this chart can be found on page 26 in the budget book, and in a few slides I'll spend some more time diving into our DCs and capital reserve. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how we fund our capital projects. And as I just mentioned, most of our funding does come from either our growth funding tools, so that's DCs, CBC, or Parkland, or it comes from the town's reserves, namely our capital and equipment reserves, or it comes through the issuance of debt. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time on each one of these items in the upcoming slides. But in addition, I do want to highlight that we have an accompanying reserve report, which is item 5.2 on today's agenda, and that has a lot of very valuable information in it. And I've recreated some of the charts that are there in the presentation today. So first, development charges. They are the single largest funder of the town's growth costs, and the town's ability to collect them is based on legislation in the Development Charges Act. Over the past number of years, a number of legislative changes have been made that affect the nature and timing of development charges for the town, and these impacts can be seen in a few different ways. For one, the number of exemptions the town must fund has increased. What this means is that for certain types of development, so for example, government development or affordable residential units, the town must contribute funds out of their own sources to pay for the costs of the development, as those building the development don't have to pay. The town now estimates that the annual cost of this is $5.4 million. Another way that changes have impacted municipalities is in changes to phase-ins and rate freezes. These reduce the amount of revenue the town collects. While the town will be able to incorporate these losses in future DC rates, it does impact the timing of capital projects and/or the use of debt financing. The third bullet I have on this slide is about commitments, and I'd like to say a couple things about those as well. First, one of the criticisms that municipalities often face is that we have a large balance in our DCs. However, while the town is expecting a balance of almost $300 million by the end of the year, nearly 50% of that figure is for projects that were approved in prior years, so the funds are already committed, and that's what this gray bar on the chart represents. As you can see, it's called work in progress. These are items that we know are upcoming, we've committed to. If you add in just over $100 million allocated to projects for the current year, you can see that much of our existing DC balance is already committed or allocated. And secondly, the chart on the screen shows that the town has regular capital spending for DC projects, somewhere between $50 million and $100 million per year, and that's what those blue bars are for on the screen. So over the 10-year forecast, the town expects to pull in over $750 million in DCs and spend over $850 million in DCs, showing that there's a lot of turnover or churn to those figures. And finally, on DCs, in that reserve report that I mentioned earlier, there's much more information on DCs. And we've also prepared Appendix E to item 5.1 on today's agenda, and that addresses some specific questions from council and the public. We've also attached something to Appendix E that we hope you'll find handy. It's a list of Q&As that you can reference or refer to as you engage with residents or provincial officials when talking about DCs. And we're also planning to add that information to our website. Town reserves. So this is another key funding source that I wanted to talk about with you today. And I'm not going to go into a ton of detail. As I said before, a lot of this information is in item 5.2 on the agenda, but I do want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. For one, our tax stabilization reserve is currently healthy and is currently above our target balance, and that's what's seen with the red line here on the chart. I will remind everyone that this reserve was as low as $2 million back in 2008 after the financial crisis, as it was used to limit the overall impact on tax rates. So these are our asset-specific reserves. I know that these charts are hard to read on the screen, but they are included in item 5.2 today. And what I'd like to highlight for you on them is the blue shading on both charts, if you focus your attention on that. That blue represents the balances in both our equipment reserves on the left and our building maintenance reserve fund on the right. Both of these balances have been experiencing a lot of inflationary pressure in the past several years, with the higher costs of vehicles and construction. To address this, the town's asset management team works alongside the program departments to review the replacement needs to ensure that asset quality and reserve balance are both taken into account. In addition, staff have also increased reserve transfers into this year's budget to help offset these concerns. So as you can see, while both graphs do dip negative, thanks to the work that the asset management team and department teams have done, along with those increases to the reserves through the operating budget, the balances will return to a positive amount. And again, Catherine will share a little bit more information about this work in her upcoming presentation. Finally, the town's capital reserve. Similar to the last chart, I know that this one is a little bit tricky to read, but it mirrors the one that we have in our reserve report on today's agenda. This chart shows the spending each year with the red bars, along with averages for the past 10 years, that's the green line, and the forecast spending, and that's the yellow line. Most importantly, it shows the actual and projected balance with that blue shading. As you can see by the blue shading in 2026, the current balance is quite strong. However, the projection shows the balance going negative towards the end of the forecast. And there are several reasons for the trending on that balance. For one, inflation has had an impact on the prices of capital items the town needs to purchase. For another, the combination of both infrastructure renewal pressures and other initiatives, think of things like streetscape works and other items identified in master plans, those items can be quite significant. So what to do about this? As we can't allow the balance to go below zero, the town will need to do one or more of a combination of things. including deferring or removing projects, increasing taxes, or exploring new sources of revenue, including the stormwater fee. And in a couple of slides, I'll actually show you what the impact is of the stormwater fee on the capital reserve. Before I do that, I do want to spend one slide on debt for you. So as many of you know, debt is a funding tool that we can use here at the town. And while all municipalities have limits on their debt and the debt levels they have that are set by the ministry, the town has further internal limits on our debt capacity. And we have this for tax-supported debt, total corporate debt, and DC debt. The town has established these limits to ensure that our debt levels remain appropriate and don't overburden us. So the chart here is a little bit busy, but I'll walk you through all the items in it. So the bars at each year are the town's various types of debt. We have tax-supported debt in dark blue, OEC-supported debt right above it, and that's for the hospital and the library in the very light blue, and then self-supported debt in mid-blue, and that would be for the debt issued for harbors and things like that. And then debt for development activities and paid for by DC revenue is in dark gray. So again, the debt issued for building 16 Mile would be included there. So if you look at that blue line right at the top at 12%, that is the town's total debt limit. And as you can see, we are below this limit for the entire 10-year forecast. The yellow line that goes across is the town's tax-supported debt limit, which basically removes the self-supported and DC components. So those are those top two parts of that bar. And so as you can see, the two bottom blue ones stay below that yellow line the whole way as well. So we are in compliance with our debt limits throughout our entire forecast, which is a good thing. All right, as I promised a few moments ago, I do have a few slides which highlight the impact that a stormwater fee would have on the 2026 budget should the fee be implemented for 2026. So I'd like to begin by showing you what this looks like on the operating budget. So first, we're going to begin with the budget that is in the budget book, and that is the basis for the presentation today. So it has an overall tax levy increase of 3.5%. So next, we can remove the direct operating costs of the stormwater program if they are funded by the fee. Currently, these are funded by the tax levy, and they have been for years. If we were to move them from being tax funded to being fee funded, they would come out of the tax levy increase. So removing 2.3 million reflects 0.35% on the tax levy. So next, the proposed stormwater plan did include the town demonstrating commitment to the program by also paying stormwater fees on the town's eligible properties. As a result, this would need to be added back to the operating budget. Staff are estimating that this would be approximately $600,000, though this amount is subject to any phase-in decisions should council make any changes to the original proposed program. And adding that number back in as a slight increase to the tax levy of 0.09%. Thirdly, we get to the costs of the capital program. The town has never directly funded the stormwater capital program. Rather, stormwater projects have competed against all their town projects for funding from the general capital levy and reserve. The asset management team has estimated that the average capital spend is about $10 million per year. And I should note that this is an average. Any given year could be larger or smaller than that number. So for example, the number in this year's budget is actually closer to 14 million. But the average is 10 million. If we were going to fund the stormwater project costs via a fee instead of the capital levy, there is an option to reduce the capital levy by 10 million, and this would drop the overall tax increase by 1.54%. Now, having said that, as I just showed you a couple of slides ago, there are a lot of budget pressures on the capital reserve in the 10-year forecast. So as a result, one option would be to increase the capital levy by 0.75% starting in 2026. Doing this would result in just over $2 million being added to the capital levy, representing 0.33%, relieving some strain on the capital reserve. So if you add all this up together, the overall increase for the town on the tax levy would be 2.03%. I also have a couple of slides to show you what this impact would be on the capital reserve projection. So you can see the capital side of things as well. So this is our starting point. This line represents the forecasted capital reserve if stormwater is not implemented. This line is the same as the blue shading that I showed you a few charts ago. As you can see, the balance in several years trends below zero, And to help address that, decisions will need to be made about things like additional revenue sources, transfers from other reserves, tax increases, or the timing of capital projects. We've also included on this chart the town's target balance for our capital reserve, which is based on 1 year's worth of capital spending from the reserve. So I'm going to add another line now, and this blue line reflects a few of the things that I mentioned a moment ago. So to create this line, we've changed all of the existing stormwater projects to being funded by the fee rather than coming from our capital levy. We've also removed $10 million from our existing capital levy transfer, and we've increased the capital levy by 0.75% to ensure that the balance doesn't go below zero. So working these items together allows the capital reserve balance to stay above zero throughout our forecast, ensuring that we are able to fund the projects in our 10-year forecast. The balance is still below our target, but we also have other ways of addressing that in future years, including transfers from other reserves, adjusting the capital levy in subsequent years, or adjusting the timing of future capital projects. So putting this all together allows for a smaller property tax increase to reflect the introduction of a stormwater fee, while also ensuring that our capital reserve balance is addressed. All right, for our last section today, we're going to spend one slide on rates and fees. So each year as part of our budget process, rates and fees are reviewed by departments to ensure that they reflect the cost of delivering services, and this is in keeping with our rates and fee policy. As a reminder, whenever fees do not fully cover the cost of a program, the difference falls to our tax levy. The direction issued by the mayor was that staff look to keep our fees in line with our user fee policy to ensure that the cost recovery rates are appropriate. Included in today's agenda is a staff report which includes more information about the rates and fees and has an appendix outlining all of the specific rates and fees to be considered for approval. The fees are posted on the town's website to allow the public time to review them. And the town staff prepared draft budget includes the revenues associated with the proposed fees. Now, as the rates and fees are approved by council and are not part of the strong mayor legislation, they, along with the planning bylaw that's required, will need to be approved by council at the conclusion of the budget process. So as staff will provide council with the appropriate wording at the conclusion of the budget process to approve the rates and fees for 2026. All right, that brings us to the end of today's overview presentation. In summary, there are a few key takeaways that we've listed here for council. The 2026 operating budget as presented by staff is coming in at 3.5%, which is in line with the mayor's direction that was endorsed by council. That figure could be reduced further if council were to implement a stormwater fee as part of the 2026 budget. The overall budget, both capital and operating, contains key investments and programs to deliver services to residents and to address council's strategic plan. The current capital budget is fully funded thanks to the current strong position of our reserves. And implementing stormwater for this year could allow for a lower increase, but will also need to reflect an increased capital levy to address other capital budget pressures. So I'd also like to remind council that the budget books are printed for you. I think I see them on most of your desks here. We also put a digital version up on our website, so members of the public can use that as well. And just as I wrap up my remarks on the budget, I did want to say thanks to those who played a role in getting us where we are today. Our department staff do a lot of work to submit their budgets in a way that balances budget increase concerns with the operational needs of each program. And so there's a lot of kudos that need to go to them and their work on it. ELT and Lisa and Ashley from our comms team were also very helpful to us in guiding our budget, especially our budget presentation. So I wanted to say thank you to them. And then finally to my budget team, Dalabar and Matt and their whole group. They do a lot of hard work in preparing the budget each year. That was especially true this year. There were a lot of late changes between stormwater and provincial changes on automated speed enforcement. So there was a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. So I did want to say thank you to them as well. And with that, Councillor Adams, that's the end of the presentation.
Okay, I know there's going to be a whole bunch of questions. I wanted to ask one clarifying question for you first, though, which is in the suggested 0.75 increase of the capital levy chart that you showed us, did that show 5 years of that increase, or is that an ongoing thing?
3 or 2, Chair Adams. That is correct. It shows 5 years of that increase to get us to zero over the full
Okay,
forecast.
so to be clear, it's not an ongoing 0.75.
Correct, 5 years is
It's a short-term 5-year period.
Correct.
Okay. So, members of council, I'm going to start going through some questions. I am going to take a bio break at 11 o'clock because everyone's been here for a while and Jonathan's been on his feet already for quite some time. So I want to recognize that. So I'm going to start with Councillor Elgar and then Councillors Chisholm and Giddings. And if we get to 11 o'clock, I'm going to break the questions and take a break, okay? Councillor Elgar?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Adams. Jonathan, thank you for the marathon presentation. Just a couple of quick questions. Parkland dedication in Appendix E, excellent report, by the way. 20.7 million. We're a little short. Now, I realize what you're saying. We've got some money in the hopper, but at the end you say maybe delay in providing the target amount of parkland. Are we just fooling ourselves by not really getting and making sure people are aware of this, what's going to happen based on what the provincial government has forced on us?
Through you, Chair Adams. It's always a struggle to try to help inform members of the public as to how parkland is calculated and how we use it and what our shortfall is. I do think that's one of the reasons we provide that monthly report for council that you're welcome to use in your newsletters so residents can see what those shortfalls are. Obviously, the less revenue that you collect, the less you have available to spend on parkland. So it's a valid concern.
The only other thing, the 33.8 million also, where we're a little short from forced on us by, again, the provincial government with all their Bill 23 and Bill 108 rate freezes. I'm just wondering, is that also, like, what can we do? Like, I realize you're saying, oh, we can add that to the next development charge, the debt financing. Is that guaranteed for sure we can do that? Or will it end up what you said in the beginning? It could be tax/other sources if needed going forward. It bothers me that we're making good decisions, but I think, are they that short term that we're going to be in trouble here, and that it's going to be the existing taxpayers that are on the roll that are going to have to be the ones subsidizing all this growth?
So through you, Chair Adams, you're actually right on all those points, Councillor Algar. We can certainly add shortfalls to our next DC rate calculations, which we're actually just starting our DC process to update our bylaw. We're starting that now. But that is limited by the service caps that you do have. So it's not it's not a slam dunk. And that's where it needs to be some combination of how do you use your debt, what projects do you do, and when do you do them? How does that relate to the timing of growth? Those are all variables that need to be considered as you go through each year's budget.
Well, I thank you for what you're doing, and you're doing an excellent job, and that's an excellent report with all the details you provided in excess of just the numbers itself. Because good job, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you. Yes, a great report, very comprehensive. I don't know how you do it, Jonathan, with your staff, and congratulations to all of you and all your staff putting this together. Just a couple quick questions and I guess statement. I think I need a tutorial with respect to the stormwater. I'm not really clear on how that's going to work. I don't want to take away from council time or budget time. Maybe we can do that offline, but I just need a little bit more after an hour and a half listening to what you put into place here, it makes it very difficult to put it together and how that's going to deal with it. So if we have a chance to go over that, I'd appreciate it. The other one, too, is we're also approving the rates and fees today. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair Adams. So that the motion today
Chisholm,
should be to
Chisholm.
receive for implementation.
Chisholm. You said Adams, didn't you?
Yeah, through
Oh,
Chair,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, through Chair Adams.
Chair, sorry, I thought he's the chair.
So my apologies. That should have said reviewed for implementation today. I think the clerk will correct the wording in the motion. Rates and fees will be approved as part of, right after you approve the budget on December. I don't have my calendar in front of me anymore, but at the very end of December.
I'm glad to hear that, because there have been some discussions with some community members about some of the rates and the fees, and looking at those. I just want to have an opportunity. If we're approving it today, it doesn't give them an opportunity when they come to the public to discuss that. So I'll hold that comment with respect to the rates and fees at this time. So thank you very much. That's all I've got to say. Sorry, my apologies, Chair.
All good. I'm sure there will be lots more discussion about the stormwater fee, and I know that in one of the other presentations coming later on in the community infrastructure section, there's a little bit more discussion about it. Councillor Giddings?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, the stormwater management fee, I appreciate we're going to be hearing more about it later on. So we will be able to reduce our property tax increase by moving it over to a fee, in essence, right?
Through you, Chair Adams, that would be correct, yes. If you take out the parts of it that were in the budget and move them to a fee, then yes.
So for our taxpayers, they'll get a break in their taxes, but we'll send them a bill for the fee. So in effect, it assists our books, but it's the same for our taxpayers.
Through you, Chair Adams, yes, the numbers they're not perfectly aligned, but they're very close, yes.
All right, thank you for that. Development charges, you talked about amounts of between 50 to 100 million per year. We see a lot in the papers and we hear a lot from council colleagues in other municipalities about reducing the development charges to assist developers and hopefully pass some of those savings along to purchasers. With 50 to 100 million dollars a year, do you have any percentage estimates in terms of what that could look like if we had to go that route? Or if we decided to go that route?
So just for clarity, through you, Chair Adams, so if you were to waive all development charges.
Yeah, or the $50 million amount.
I mean, if you were to waive development charges, I think one of the municipalities near to us just did that, although with some caveats, I think, on that approval. I mean, if we currently have a DC balance, and so you use up those funds first because and I think I've showed a chart before, the timing of your revenue and your timing of your costs can fluctuate wildly. So we currently have a balance, so it's not like next year's amount would go right on the tax levy. But what you'd have to do is take a look at the long term to say, what projects do we need to do to support the services based on growth? And then which ones do you push out? But also, what does that impact if you have to stop funding them through your DCs? So it'd be hard for me to give you an exact number because it would take a little bit of time to work its way through with the projects that we already have approved. But I mean, in a pinch, $50 million is a pretty significant amount in each year's budget. Our tax levy's just about 300 million.
No, I appreciate that. I'm not looking for exact fee. I guess at the $50 million level, we would move to that skull and crossbone dropping below the line
Yes.
many years before.
Yes.
Good enough. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor O'Meara?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And maybe just to pull on that thread a little bit, I mean, we can't, we only get DCs if developers are building. And we only get permits and permit fees if permits are being pulled for development. So everything I'm hearing is that the development and the building community are slamming the brakes really quickly on a lot of things. So have we mapped out, and please feel free if this is a question for a commissioner later just to tell me to cool my jets, but have we mapped out what happens if building stops, if our assessment growth shrinks? Have we mapped out where the development community is going right now? And in terms of all of our numbers factor in building continues at the pace that it has for an unprecedented amount of time in Oakville here. Have we mapped out what happens if what we see is going to come to fruition and building permits stop being issued and DCs stop getting collected because nobody's building?
So through you, Chair Adams, there's a lot to unpack in that question. I'll try to touch on some of it, but perhaps some of the commissioners can address it in their presentations too. I think there's a lot of variables that go into it. So when you were speaking, some of the things that popped into my head as it relates to DCs, in our master plans, we try to tie the projects to population targets. So if your development slows down, you don't need your projects nearly as soon as you thought you did if there's less growth. So that would push out the timing of your projects, which also you don't have the revenue for, but you don't have the needs at the service levels as well. So that would be one variable we would take into account. On another thing, you mentioned even if building slows down, what happens to that? We do have, just purely for our building department, not DCs, but we have a building enterprise reserve that is supposed to ride the peaks and valleys of development on the operations side. And then in terms of specifically mapping it out, each year's forecast, we do take a look at our projects and when we need them. So it's not, I don't think we've ever sat down and said, if they all stop tomorrow, what happens? Because it's such a long-term focus. But that's certainly something we look at each year, even with our, our planning revenue, our building revenue, and things like that. So I know it's not a full answer for you, but hopefully it touches on some of those points. Maybe CEO Closey has more to add to that.
Through you, Chair Adams. The only thing I would add is 2008, we went through a similar type of process. So we would look to some of the strategies we applied at that point in time, which we did use the building reserve to its full extent. In fact, we had to go into the tax stabilization. As Jonathan had said in his presentation, it had gone down to about $2 million in that point in time. After that, we had paid it back through things that had come in. So we had reserves in order to sustain us. In addition, from a staffing level, we repositioned staff into other areas of work so that there was less reliance on the building reserve, and we got other things done in the meantime. So there was a group of strategies that applied on. We were able to weather through the 2008, 2009, turn down the economy actually quite well.
Thank you.
Any other questions right now? Councillor Haslett-Thiel?
Thank you. Through you, Chair Adams. Thank you very much for always taking us through the detail. I just wanted to clarify process a tiny bit. From a rates and fees perspective, the opportunity to ask questions on those, will there be a future opportunity rather than go through my list of questions right now?
Through you, Chair Adams. So if there are questions on specific rates and fees, I would suggest maybe after the commissioner presentation. So for example, if you have one on recreation, you wait till Commissioner DeMasso's up, just because he would be better able to answer that question. We may not be able to answer it right here for you, but we can also come back with those answers at a future budget committee meeting.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And further to my colleagues' questions on the stormwater, will there be a chart that beyond what you've already shown us that shows the actual, not just that we can come in under a lower tax levy, but then what that percentage would be if it was with the current proposed stormwater program?
Through you, Chair Adams, so just for clarity, you're asking, so the current budget right now includes our base level of service. You're asking about the climate resiliency part of the program that was presented on September 29th, correct?
Actually, no. I'm just
Okay.
trying to, in layman's terms, get to what some of my colleagues have mentioned, which is that we have a stormwater program fee we have to make some decisions on. You've given us an option around how we could reduce the levy, but it doesn't change how it hits the pocketbook of a resident or a business. And will we get a chart that shows us that in the cumulative?
Through you, Chair Adams.
I think she's trying to get to, can we get something that shows the tax levy impact plus the fee impact?
Yeah.
Which we've done a little bit of modeling that shows 2% plus the fee, which it really depends on the house, because are you talking about an apartment, are you talking about a semi, or are you talking about a detached? And if so, are you talking about $1 million home or a $3 million home? The percentage is different because the fee is flat, and it doesn't matter whether it's a $1 million house or a $3 million house, there's a flat fee. So staff have done a little bit of modeling to try and guesstimate what that number would be in different circumstances, and I think they can illuminate that a little bit later on.
Yes, thank you, Chair Adams. So I expected a question similar to this. So the budget that you've got in the book is based on 3.5%. I compared that to what a budget would be at 2.03%, the number I showed on that slide. Mm-hmm. And on $1 million home, that represents about $120 in tax savings. I believe the first year of the stormwater fee is $136. So very, very similar numbers. And again, as Councillor Adams said, if we wanted to do that on different size properties, we'd have to model that because each property's tax bill is unique. But that's the overly simplistic answer.
So thank you for that, and thank you for having them do the modeling, Chair Adams. At some point through this process, we're going to need some charts and, that we can push out to people to get their head around it, because you're brilliant, and while we have very smart residents, maybe not in the financial analysis of how this is all going to hit them when they get their tax bill. So I'd like to be able to, I think all of us would like to be able to explain it more crisply and clearly in their on their tax bill. My other question is just around the gapping. I just wanted to understand it just a little bit because it is in the one section. So if I understand you correctly, we continue to have gapping as a result of vacancies and the length of time it takes to fill the positions. You've determined that the majority of those positions need to be retained, but you've incorporated into each commissioner's budget the projected gapping that would occur. Did I understand that correctly?
Through you, Chair Adams, it's actually even more than the commissioners. It's into each program budget. We have done that in the past, but we've continued to refine that number in each program budget. We still have a little bit left in corporate because you can never predict exactly where in the organization you'll have gapping, but we do have more of it in each program budget.
Okay, but the volume of it still remains upwards over 2 million, just going.
Yeah, so the total, if you look at Appendix B, the total budget includes 3.6 million in budgeted gapping. That's up from 3.5 million in last year's budget.
Okay, I'll have more questions on that later.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Okay, Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, it came up with the region of 38.2% that is in the tax pie that goes to the region. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair Adams, I think that was correct. I'm trying to flip to that one, but I believe that's right. Yes, 38.2.
Okay, just a quick question, and you might not have an answer for it, but now with the decreased services provided by the region, no longer the planning authority has disappeared, and now Heritage Services has kind of disappeared from the region. What was our percentage on the pie last year with respect to the region cut? Was it the same? Is it steady, or has it gone up or down?
Through you, Chair Adams, I don't know that number off the top of my head. I'd have to pull last year's budget book to see, but we can get that number for you.
Well, call me madcap, just to assume that their service has been reduced. Would we not have a reduction in that percentage of the pie?
Through you, Chair Adams, that would only happen if they decrease their budget.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mayor Burton.
My colleague has always been alert to the need to understand what the region is doing, and I'll summarize the situation for you as the region portion grew rather than shrank because the increase to police far dwarfed the decrease from the minor heritage program that was canceled.
Okay, I sense we may be finished with questions, and I'm going to suggest that we take a 10-minute recess to give everyone a break before we go on to. Okay, welcome back, everybody, and welcome, Catherine. Asset management time. The floor is yours.
Okay. So the town's $4 billion in assets or infrastructure systems are the backbone of our community. They support a range of municipal services that enable the quality of life experienced by the residents, businesses, and other stakeholders. Our town assets support a range of recreational activities, hobbies, and community spaces through our various community centers, sports arenas, and libraries. We have 9 fire stations located across the community to house our firefighters, vehicles, and equipment to ensure they can respond to emergencies in a timely manner. Children and adults alike can be found participating in soccer, baseball, basketball, tennis, pickleball, and other activities in many of our sports fields. Residents also enjoy a wide range of outdoor leisure activities in our 41 community parks, 210 neighborhood parks, and 277 kilometers of recreational trails. Transit service runs effectively throughout the town, meeting a range of transportation needs through the use of our 136 buses, owned and operated by the town. And lastly, our people, goods, and services can get around town in an effective manner on over 200,000 kilometers of roads and 1,700 kilometers of active transportation facilities. Asset management helps to put rigor and structure around the decision-making process and the information we use to make strategic decisions. It's about doing the right thing to the right asset at the right time, so that our assets continue to work well with no surprises and provide our citizens with reliable services. Asset management is about developing a long-term plan that maintains our existing assets and considers future infrastructure needs so that our residents can enjoy the services and amenities that contribute to their quality of life. The main component of the asset management program are service levels, risk, and costs. When all three are considered in our decision-making, it allows us to deliver quality, reliable, safe, and sustainable services to our residents. Service levels considered the current and future performance needed from our assets to meet the delivery of the available programs and services offered by the town. Risk involves minimizing the impact of the asset failure and considers the level of consequence to our services and programs. Lastly, cost involves the options and looking at the whole life cost of the asset, not just the initial capital outlay, but the ongoing maintenance, renewal, and future capital costs. Review of our program and service levels objectives and the asset performance needed to meet those objectives is completed on an annual basis. By assessing the life cycle of the asset, evaluating the cost options, and understanding individual risk factors, we can determine the most appropriate budget investments required, maximizing the value of our investments. So asset management has been a priority for a number of years now, and the town has been investing in developing and improving our asset management practices and processes across all departments. A large part of our asset management cycle is having solid information on our assets. Staff have been collecting information on the town assets since 2009, when legislation first required municipalities to have an inventory of their assets. Since then, we've continued to grow our asset database, tracking various activities to include information such as the current replacement value, the age and useful life, as well as life cycle maintenance activities, inspections, and condition of our assets. And lastly, we monitor asset breakdowns and the corrective maintenance costs. As part of our ongoing asset management program, staff analyze this information to help inform our decision-making, to identify efficiencies in how we manage our infrastructure, to reduce the risk and optimize our funding needs. So today I'd like to share 3 examples of work we completed in 2025 that's related to our parks, fleet, and our road assets. So when our asset database was originally set up, information on the useful life was sometimes estimated based on industry standards, manufacturer suggestions, as well as best practices. Now that we have a number of years of historical data, we've completed a review of these assumptions for the town's various park assets to compare the assigned useful life to what we have been experienced in terms of the actual age at the time of disposal and the trends that we've been seeing in the condition of the park assets. We were also looking for opportunities to streamline operational practices and review management strategies for assets that have a low risk or impact of failure. Overall, in conjunction with the park staff, we evaluated 15 different types of park amenities, such as playgrounds, bridges, stairs, shade structures, sports fields, and playing courts. The review revealed that many park assets are being disposed of or forecasted for renewal at ages later than they had originally anticipated. This trend reflects the park's operational team due diligence in preventive maintenance programs and suggests that the current useful life assumptions that we've been using may be conservative, as many of our park assets are lasting longer than expected. As a result, it was determined there was potential to safely extend the life of these assets without compromising service. And on average, the life cycle of some of the park assets have been extended by 5 years. This has resulted in about $2.8 million worth of renewal and replacement being pushed out beyond the 10-year program. Secondly, we've refined the annual condition inspection process to focus on our assets that are approaching end of life within the next 5 years or where there's known operational issues. Previously, the practice was to inspect all assets every year. This focused approach has reduced the time needed for the condition inspections and has proved to provide more accurate and detailed condition reports. Lastly, the team evaluated the assets that present a low risk of impact or failure, and as a result, a change in the asset management strategy for items like information kiosks and water features was shifted to a run-to-fail, or what we call a fix-as-needed approach, rather than pre-planning them in our forecast. This resulted in about $570,000 being removed from the 10-year forecast. So I'll shift over to some of the changes we made in fleet decision criteria. So asset management staff, in conjunction with the Roads and Works fleet management team, developed a fleet replacement criteria model to refine how decisions were made on the timing of replacing the town vehicles. In the past, the decisions relied heavily on age and visual inspection of the vehicles. As we all know from experience, the decision when to replace a vehicle relies on multiple factors. Some vehicles can last up to 10 years depending on usage and if it's well maintained. However, I know we've all had that one lemon where something was always going wrong and in constant need of repair, even though it was only 2 or 3 years old. Therefore, the model we have developed takes into consideration multiple factors: the total kilometers on the vehicle, corrective maintenance costs, the physical condition, as well as the age of the vehicle. A score is given to each category based on a predetermined scale, and the vehicle must reach a minimum overall total score to be considered for replacement. In addition, through the use of the historical mileage data, we can start to apply an annual kilometer usage and estimate the remaining useful life to help inform our future replacement needs into the forecast, again, rather than just using age. So far this model has been applied to the town's small fleet vehicles such as cars, trucks, vans, and SUVs, but it's across all the various departments. So the majority of these falling within roads and works, parks, municipal enforcement, fire, as well as transit department. The larger fire suppression vehicles or trucks and pumpers are not evaluated using this method, as they follow legislative renewal requirements. In addition, the transit conventional and specialized buses have also been excluded so far. This multi-factor criteria method was evaluated to compare to the original method of forecasting and found that overall, the replacement life cycle of these vehicles has been extended on average by 3 years. In 2026, a total of 23 vehicles were pushed out into future years. When we look at the full 10-year forecast, a total of 4 vehicles were pushed beyond the 10-year period, resulting in about $400,000 reduction. This evidence-based model leverages the data collected on our vehicles to help assess remaining useful life based on the historical usage patterns and benchmarks. Vehicles with declining scores can also be flagged for priority, enabling proactive maintenance and continuous status updates. Overall, this method helps to provide a transparent, data-driven rationale to allocate our capital to the most critical assets first, avoiding disposal of our assets earlier than necessary and maximizing their service value. So I'd like to just call upon our Manager of Infrastructure Planning, Paul Allen, to walk you through the analysis done on the road resurfacing program.
Good morning. The town's road pavement is an asset that most residents and businesses use on a daily basis, whether you're in a car, on a transit bus, riding your bike, or walking on a local street. Council has maintained and improved this asset through annual budget allocations to the road resurfacing program. Today, I'll briefly walk through the proposed 10-year budget and the level of service analysis for the road resurfacing program. This graph illustrates the last 10 years of the road resurfacing program. The average annual budget over the last 10 years was $7.38 million. You'll notice that the road resurfacing program was deferred in 2020 and reduced to $5 million in 2021 due to COVID. The road resurfacing program is the largest, but not the only program that helps us to improve and maintain the town's road pavement. Town capital road reconstruction projects provide improvements to the road pavement. For example, the reconstruction and urbanization of York Street and Walls Road that was completed earlier this year included new pavement. Also, the Roads and Works Department completes pavement patching and crack sealing each year. The region of Halton normally resurfaces a number of town roads each year as part of their water and wastewater projects on town streets. Finally, subdivision development adds newly paved streets to the road network. So all of these programs contribute to improving the overall town's road pavement network and need to be taken into consideration when determining the overall budget for the road resurfacing program. Council in 2019 approved the level of service objective for the pavement network. The goal is to have an overall pavement quality index, or PQI, of 70 or higher. To put what that PQI means into context, when a road is resurfaced, it is given a PQI value of 100. Currently, one of the streets in the town with the lowest PQI value is currently Spears Road between 4th Line and Dorvale Drive that has a PQI value of 29, so fairly low. This section of Spears Road is in very poor condition and is waiting for capital reconstruction and widening to begin in 2026. We also have council-approved guidelines for when roads are resurfaced. Arterial and collector roads are identified for resurfacing when they drop below 65. And local roads with a PQI of less than 50 are identified for resurfacing. So that kind of helps us flag streets as they start to deteriorate and helps us to explain to residents why certain roads are paved or not paved. That guideline is very helpful for us answering those types of questions. Field measurements to confirm the pavement quality were last completed in the fall of 2023. The overall PQI for the town's road network was measured at a very impressive value of 77.1. So that's 7.1 points higher than the level of service objective of 70. Our pavement management system had estimated that the average PQI would be 72.4. So therefore, the road network is actually in slightly better condition than we predicted, which is good news. This graph illustrates the proposed 10-year budget for the road resurfacing program. We are recommending a budget of $7.5 million per year for the next 10 years. This budget will maintain the pavement network above the level of service target of 70. This represents $1.5 to $4.5 million in annual reductions from last year's 10-year plan, or $33 million in total over the next 10 years. You might be asking, what has changed, or how can we decrease the budget by $33 million and still maintain the condition of the pavement? The primary reason we can decrease spending is because of the previous investments that Council has made in the road resurfacing program. Basically, there are fewer streets that are in very poor condition, like Spears Road. This is allowing us to do less expensive rehabilitation strategies. At one time, 10 years or so ago, most of our rehab strategies involved completely removing and replacing all the asphalt on the streets. Today, we quite often only need to grind off the top 50 millimeters of asphalt and replace that quantity. So this reduces the rehabilitation cost by 50% or more on an individual street. The 2025 road resurfacing program that is currently in progress has approximately 1/3 of the budget assigned to the 50 millimeter grind and repave retreatments, and we anticipate this trend to continue going forward. We can therefore basically rehabilitate the same amount of area or kilometers of asphalt as we did in previous years, but at a lower cost and lower budget. Another major factor supporting the lower budget for the road resurfacing program is the number and size of capital road reconstruction projects in the 10-year plan. Spears Road, Wycroft Road, 6 Line, North Service Road, South Service Road, Iroquois Shore Road, and a number of other streets are scheduled to be widened and reconstruction in the 10-year capital plan. And all of these projects will include new pavement. And the new pavement will be funded out of those individual capital projects, not the road resurfacing budget. Finally, the coordination of the road resurfacing program with other town reconstruction projects, roads and works maintenance activities, region Halton projects, and new development all help to ensure that the road resurfacing budget is maintaining and improving the condition of the road pavement network. We do not have the data to confirm this, but asset management can confidently suggest that Oakville's overall pavement quality is among the best when compared to other Canadian and Ontario municipalities. Thank you. I'll now pass the presentation back to Catherine to wrap up. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. So just a few closing remarks then. So overall, we're finding that the assets are lasting beyond their expected useful life. This can be attributed to both the early assumptions used to assign our useful life, but also speaks to the rigorous preventive maintenance and repair and routine inspections done by our operational staff to ensure assets are being maintained appropriately. These annual reviews and analysis support a shift towards a performance-based asset management, where decisions are being driven by actual asset performance rather than fixed timelines. This ongoing approach can lead to more sustainable and cost-effective management of our infrastructure by leveraging the data to continue to identify efficiencies in how we manage infrastructure, make decisions, and evaluate risk to optimize our funding needs. So in closing, asset management is an ongoing process that takes time and effort to develop. It can take years to fully implement, and even then, it is always evolving, and there's a need to continue to evaluate our practices and our plans. It is a town-wide responsibility that touches every department and every position having a role. Together, we plan for the future to maintain our assets over the whole lifespan manage our risk, and invest in our resources so that town assets continue to provide the valuable services and programs that our residents have come to enjoy. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you very much for the good news stories. Councillor Chisholm?
Thank you, Chair. Just a question, Catherine, with respect to the fleet. Can we put that slide back up with the 4 principles you look at with respect to retiring or maintaining vehicles? You have that slide?
Yeah. I think that's slide 9.
Yes, that's at the fleet decision. This is just on our assets, but don't we have a kind of lease agreements with vehicles that we just lease on a seasonal basis? Is this part, that's not part of any of this, is that correct?
Through you, Chair Adams, no, it only applies to our town-owned vehicles.
Okay, so any of those processes of criteria model has no impact on leased vehicles. So I would assume that would be the responsibility of the leasing company with respect to any maintenance or corrective maintenance costs and so forth. That's all put through a contract. Is that correct?
Through you, Councillor Adams, that's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Nanda?
Thank you. Through you, Chair Adams. Thank you for the presentation. I had a question on the maintenance of roads in resurfacing. Being in a newer area, a lot of our roads are unassumed. One question I had is, how long, what is the average it takes for us to assume a road?
I'm not sure. Through you, Councillor Adams, I don't know that answer to the question. That's part and parcel to the development process.
I would suggest, subject to Gabe correcting me, about 2 years for the assumption process.
Okay, so during that time, are the developers accountable for the roads? We've received several complaints about roads and potholes and different things. And if they're not being fixed, are the developers held accountable for that?
Through you, Councillor Adams, just to respond back to you, Councillor Nanda, my understanding is between 4 years to 7 years. Just wanted to make that correction. Thank you. Sorry about that for the assumption.
So the question is, like, we're maintaining all these roads, but we have several new unassumed roads in our ward. And so the question is back to who is going to maintain those roads while they're unassumed?
Again, through you, Mr. Chair, typically the developer would continue to make sure that they are maintaining. We do, in terms of roads and works, we will continue to do any work that is post-assumption. So we would go ahead and patch, resurface, all that will go into the asset management life cycle.
Okay. And so I guess the question is, in like 2 years, if the developer doesn't want to fix the road, how do we fix that issue? Do we fix it and give them the bill, or what do we do?
In cases they do not, and based on the agreements that are in place, we would go ahead and make repairs if it's a safety concern, and then we would make sure that they are accordingly billed for it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And before we assume them, they have to meet our standards before we take them over. So when we take a new road over, it meets a standard, and then it comes into our fleet of road network.
That's correct. There is a requirement for them to meet a certain quality when we take them into our assumption. Also, we take securities through the subdivision process to make sure we have the funds available if we need to do some action in repairing, we can easily recoup the funds.
Mayor Burton, does that answer the thing you were trying to flag? Okay. Councillor Shi?
Thank you, Chair Adams. Thank you for the presentation. So would you go back to slide 10 about all those numbers about our cars, fleet? So do you have a number about, so because I saw there's several small cars is already EV, So what's the percentage about the EV and the traditional gasoline cars, and what's the plan for the next 10 years or few years? So how we will replace some portion about from gasoline to EV to reduce all those gasoline maintenance cost. Any plan for that?
Through you, Chair Adams, I think the town is currently looking at an overall EV strategy for our fleet. Currently, as you know, we are transitioning to some electrical vehicles as a kind of ongoing basis. So I think, you saw that the municipal enforcement vehicles are electric. So we do look at them on a case-by-case basis right now, but we are developing an overall strategy. The focus right now, as you can imagine, has been on the transit electrification of fleet and understanding that and working through that before we kind of jump into an overall program of transitioning all of our fleet.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor, how's that feel?
Through you, Chair Adams. My question is also around EV, just in terms of battery life, which is, so I'm impressed that we've reassessed our criteria for what are gasoline cars, but the EVs will have a different lifespan. So would we see that assessment going forward around how quickly they need to be replaced?
Through you, Chair Adams, most definitely. So we are starting to track that information on our EV vehicles that we have today so that we can understand, what those future life cycle replacement needs are. I think currently we have some estimates or best practices, but we do need to start to track that information so we can make informed decisions going forward.
So my follow-up to that is, when you have an EV vehicle, you need your EV chargers. And in our asset management plan, are we factoring in growth in EV chargers, or are we relying on them being leased or provided by others?
Through you, Chair Adams, when we are planning to purchase an electrical vehicle, some of the charging infrastructure is incorporated into that capital cost. The smaller vehicles are more like a plug-and-play type of thing, so it's not as costly as what we found with the transit buses, which needed really significant infrastructure changes to our facility. But they are being built into the capital purchase when we're making those decisions to purchase EV vehicles.
So if a vendor was prepared to have, to support an expansion of EV chargers, would that see a reduction in our costs?
Through you, Chair, are you talking about the on-street type of? Oh, okay. That's a different model than what I was speaking to. I was just referring to the ones that we use to charge our own fleet vehicles. I'm not sure if I think Julie Clark has some information on, sort of the town-wide public-facing EV infrastructure and what's being done to look at that on a go-forward basis.
Through you, Chair. Councillor, could I just get you to repeat the question for me, please?
So I just was trying to understand, because I thought I saw some town vehicles using our on-street EV chargers. May have missed that. So I'm just trying to understand, there are, considerable vendors out there interested in expanding the EV charging network, and at potentially reduced costs and with other. Is that, given that they would be from another vendor, would we take ownership of those and include those in the asset management plan? And is that being reviewed?
So through you, Chair, we are coming forward with a EV charging policy that will come to council in January. to look at what our role is in providing public charging systems that are owned by us. Or do we transition to a third party to run that? So I don't want to get too much into the details right now because we are still working through that recommendation, but we are planning to bring that to council in January.
Okay, thank you for that. My other question is on roads. So I don't think there is a person in the world that doesn't love to drive on a road that's, you know, in beautiful shape. And I'll call out that Glen Abbey has amazing roads. Last year, it was 6.2 million, I believe, but you're projecting to a higher amount as a regular commitment. Why the difference?
Through you, Chair Adams. Last year, we did recognize there was a significant amount in some of those larger widening projects or reconstruction projects, so that reduced the amount just for 2025. We've now taken a look at that data that's come in on the future the existing PQI of the road network and where we're sitting and looking forward, and average that amount to $7.5 million going forward.
And this is on the ground review of the road network on the PQI?
Through you, Chair Adams, that's correct. It's the actual physical condition audit and review, the camera work and other things that go into that.
All right, thanks very much.
Great, thank you very much. I think that covers all the questions. Thank you very much, Catherine, for all the good news stories that you brought with us. Excellent examples. We're going to go to Julie Clark and the CEO office section of the presentations, and that should take us to lunch, I think, everyone.
Standing between someone's lunch. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm providing an overview of the budgets for the Office of the CAO and the Government Relations, the Corporate Strategy and Government Relations Department. And our roles are outlined here, and combined, these areas provide leadership to the organization and advance the town's priorities. So what we do, we ensure that work undertaken aligns with and advances Council's strategic plan. We coordinate and support our government relations priorities, and we enable excellence through research, continuous improvement, and project management support to departments. The programs we deliver are outlined here, and detailed information can be found in the tabs noted. So a few highlights from 2025 are listed here. Oakville led the development of standardized housing metrics to allow for a consistent tracking of municipal housing targets. On inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility, Council will see a recognition policy and the first progress report in December of this year, so that is to come. For climate action, staff did provide an update to Council on October the 6th on this. However, I would like to repeat some of the highlights today. We're continuing to follow the task force recommendations and now meet 77% of them. And this work aligns us with global best practices. Community education and outreach is a key aspect of the work of the climate team, and we undertake that year-round to ensure that residents are informed and involved. This year, we held 12 community events, we conducted 3 educational campaigns, and we completed heat pump training with 116 contractors. Under accountable government, I'll speak more to the $600,000 savings target shortly, but I would like to highlight the work that the Corporate Strategy and Government Relations Department does in advancing Council's priorities. We set direction through policy and directly support departments in continuous improvement and project management initiatives. And a few examples of where we partnered are shown here. And you'll hear more about those in the specific commissioner presentations to come. So some highlights from 2025, some of our KPIs. We've introduced some new ones this year on staff inclusion and the completion rate against the IDEA multi-year plan. And continuing on the next page, we've shared some information on our lean program. I will note there is an unfortunate typo in that, but in terms of a good news story, the number of total trained staff on lean is actually 385, and we have 18 Greenbelt projects that are working towards completion by the end of this year. And I did want to talk specifically about our reductions in GHG emissions and energy usage, as the results are lower than they were last year. And these are 2024 results. We always lag 1 year in our reporting. And the reduction is primarily due to construction at 16 Mile Sports Complex. However, I'm happy to share the new geothermal HVAC system is now operational, and we do anticipate improved performance for this metric going forward. So moving on to budget influences. There are several external influences that we monitor, and almost all require proactive intergovernmental relations to ensure the risks and opportunities facing Oakville are known and understood. International trends, global concerns, like tariffs and the upcoming CUSMA review, as well as global conflict, remain on our radar and highlight continued economic uncertainty and inflation concerns. Understanding and assessing federal and provincial policy changes on a variety of fronts, including some changes just announced yesterday, require regular review and adjustment by town staff. And we don't see any signs of this slowing down over the next several years. And it highlights the importance of staying up to date and communicating town interests and needs. Trends towards greater incivility, while generated largely by the US, but also gaining traction in Canada, we are seeing greater distrust in government and customer service challenges. Alongside this, more positively, is the importance of increased transparency and community input to build trust and engagement. For climate action, staff continue to monitor any changes in direction from both the federal and provincial levels of government. We're also monitoring the market and looking to assess and plan our next major push towards electrification. Emerging technology, while there are many, I did want to just touch on 3 examples today, which include artificial intelligence, of course, which covers a wide range of functions, with predictive analysis and generative content being of particular interest to municipalities. But these do come with significant costs. Overlaying AI is quantum computing, which is still several years out, but will support highly complex problem solving and modeling, and underscores the importance of solid data management practices. And a third example is green technology, things like next generation solar panels and battery storage. And finally, workplace culture. The complexity of our work means we simply can't view issues from our own department lens, so how we continue to connect staff across departments and issues is important. So looking ahead to 2026, some key actions include the next community satisfaction survey, which is held every 2 years. That will launch in early Q1. We will continue implementation of the IDEA plan with a focus on community engagement and service delivery, and looking to see where we can reduce barriers to program and service access. For environmental sustainability, we are looking to develop the Climate Action Roadmap, which is a capital request in this budget and represents the next phase of our climate action planning. We're partnering with the building department on a home energy retrofit orientation, along with Humber College and Enbridge, to highlight practical renovations that improve energy use and outline the rebate programs available. And we're partnering with Roads and Works on a corporate fleet electrification study, which will help us plan out that next push to electrification, including how much it's going to cost and any other infrastructure needs required. There are a number of items under accountable government I would like to highlight. One is an artificial intelligence readiness assessment, which will help us understand where AI can be best used, what investments are needed, and how we can move forward in a safe and strategic way. We are developing a multi-year internal audit plan to guide the work of the internal audit function, as well as updating our business continuity plans. Now, I would like to take a moment just to talk a little bit more about the savings and efficiencies work that we've done this past year. As Director Vanderheiden mentioned, we've always been focused on finding savings, and staff regularly review spending patterns and any changes that result in reduced costs, like contract changes through bulk purchasing. These reductions are built into the base budget and help us achieve the budget direction set by the mayor. And you will see some highlights of this further in the commission presentations. However, when Council established a specific savings target last year, we saw an opportunity to complement our regular review of budgets and explore a wider range of potential savings, from modest to significant, to straightforward to complex. And this work, as John mentioned, is being led across departments and is guided by data, collaboration, and a commitment to aligning our resources with the priorities that matter most to our community. So this year, we reviewed operating budgets by program and spending categories and position vacancies. And the results of these efforts are shown on the current slide. As we look ahead to achieving the remaining savings targets, the next steps include exploring how services are delivered and whether service levels can be adjusted, ways to improve day-to-day operations, and opportunities to use technology and automation. And staff will, of course, report back to Council with recommendations as part of the 2027 budget. Regarding the program areas that I'm outlining today, we've put forward a staffing reduction in the administrative executive leadership function. This was a position that supported both the CAO's office and the office of the mayor and council, and it was eliminated through attrition. And the responsibilities of that role have been assigned to existing staff in both areas. Excuse me. So now I'll move through the budget. The operating budget falls 100% within the accountable government priority, and capital is a mix of accountable government and environmental sustainability. This slide shows the proportional amount of these program areas compared to the overall budget. And this chart shows the increase in the budget from 2025 to 2026. I do want to flag the increase to business support services is largely driven by the reallocation of internal labor recoveries to corporate, reflecting updated business practices. And all other increases are due to inflationary increases due to wages and benefits and gapping dollars being transferred over to the program areas. I am requesting a 2-year temporary contract to continue to assess the long-term need of a second strategic research analyst position. We introduced a new research function last year to fill an identified gap in the organization for research and jurisdictional insights in support of council priorities, senior leadership initiatives, and department projects. So examples of work to date include research on encampments, protests at vulnerable community sites, sports activities on municipal right-of-way, street parking, and the intergovernmental priorities approved by council. So this is a service that's available to the whole organization to support their staff reports and their review of a variety of issues. Now on to the capital budget. This slide shows the proportion of our capital budget to the overall. This shows the breakdown by program area. And for capital projects, we are, as I mentioned, looking to fund the development of a climate action roadmap, which will replace both the climate emergency declaration and the community energy strategy, providing one consistent plan with one consistent set of targets and deadlines to advance climate action across the town. And the Planet E-Services is to complete the implementation of E-Plan for planning and development engineering. And finally, at the end, these are the list of council requests that we received, as well as where to find any more information. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks so much. Councillor Knoll?
Thank you. I have two quick questions with respect to page or slide number 12. There are two items on there I just want to ask a question about. One is software maintenance, savings of $198,300, I think it said. In this day and age where we're seeing more and more software costs becoming cloud-based, annualized contracts, how could we potentially be reducing software maintenance by $198,000 beyond eliminating software in general? So the two other organizations that I'm directly involved in budgeting, but these numbers go up every year. So I'm surprised to see this number going down.
Through you, Chair. So Councillor Knoll, you're 100% correct. Software as a service tends to go up probably about 5 to 6% per year. What we did is take a look internally at duplication of efforts around, do we have duplication of software solutions? Are we optimizing our licensing with existing solutions? And what we found is we're able to eliminate some software that was duplicated and also reduce some licensing costs. So that's where that $198K came from. I'm actually in the process of building a catalog right now of all software being utilized at the town and building what I call a sanctioned software list. And part of that process will be evaluating, are there any other duplication of efforts where we have one or two solutions, or sometimes three, that provide or solve the same problem. So I think we'll see a bit more savings and optimization there. It's also, I want to rein that in all under IT management, and some of it's not. That way we can properly manage that moving forward. So software as a service is a big increase for us every year. You'll see that in the budget again this year, again, typically 5 or 6% on those software as a service. But this was something different. This was looking at all the other software solutions, optimizing things, reducing license counts, and eliminating something that was a duplicate.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was actually a perfect answer. I may clip that video response and share it with my friends at the Halton Regional Police Service, because that's where we're seeing massive increases in software costs. I'm assuming that they've done those, but thank you for that. That was great. The second one on that same page was pool, chemical, and office supply reductions. Kind of a strange two to be paired together, but just on the pool chemicals, anytime you start touching pool chemicals, you're talking about public safety. So I'm just curious, how do you justify the reduction of pool chemical costs and correlate that with the public safety of the swimmers?
So through you, Chair Knoll, the answer to the question is that we've incorporated new technology called Sanitech, which reduces the amount of water that we're wasting to backwash systems and to replenish water levels. And that's where the savings in chlorine comes, in fact. So no impact at all to safety. It's in fact water quality loss that was contributing to additional chemical use.
Great. So reducing costs and increasing safety. Well done. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks so much. Okay, everybody, it's lunchtime. Oh, no, somebody's got a question. Councillor, how's it feel? You're holding us up. No pressure.
It's just sandwiches, Chair Adams. hold your excitement. I would, and again, I don't want to hold people up from lunch, but if you could come back with some information on the strategic business advisors. You might recall last year, there was a headcount increase. There was a discussion about where those individuals should report and the work and efforts that they would put in and how that would benefit the organization. And I think speaking to that would be helpful. And in particular, so speaking to that would be helpful. And then the other, I think would be beneficial, because I appreciate you continually giving us the update on where we're at on lean. But if there's 16 different Greenbelt projects underway, it might give us a glimpse into some of the potential either service improvements or efficiencies that may come from those efforts. And I'd like to understand those better.
Can I answer those now?
Absolutely.
Okay. So a few examples, I'll start with the lean. I'll talk about 3 examples, and then you will hear more information in the commissioner presentations on these. So 3 examples this year include a review of our central stores, which looked at improving inventory and our supply chain operations. We did a bylaw management review, which streamlined processes and improved the quality and usability of the bylaw search site. Some indication that error rates had been reduced by up to 75% on that. And we did work on staff onboarding, offboarding, and crossboarding. This is about improvements to how people come on to the organization, leave the organization, and it simplified processes for the hiring managers and reduced errors when employees were boarded in some way. So we reduced steps, we automated a few things, ensured different systems were connecting properly. And so the error rate, I don't have an error rate reduction on that, but it did reduce error rates on that. And as I said, you will hear more examples in the specific commission presentations going forward. The strategic business advisor position that was approved last year, it was 1 FTE that went into the new the business support services unit that provides support to corporate services and community services. We've just hired that person. They have been with us for just under a month. They remain available to support commissioners in responding to complex issues management. So that was the piece that we talked about last year. These situations that don't cleanly fit into Service Oakville, they may have issues cutting across different program areas. And so that position does provide support directly to the commissioners and directors. And as issues come up, they are available to stick handle and, as I say, quarterback some of those responses. I do also want to note that in conversations with Director Duarte on communications and customer experience, we are talking about how we do handle those very complex cases and how we work through those. So those conversations are continuing now that we do have the FTE in place. They've been with us for a month.
I'll follow up later. Thank you.
Okay.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for the Q&A. And to all the staff teams that have come through so far, great work. We're going to take a lunch break now, and I'm going to suggest that we take a 25-minute lunch break, and it is just about 12:10, so let's come back at 12:35, and we'll hear from the corporate services side and, time permitting, the community development. Okay? Recess. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We now have quorum in the room, and so
recording in progress.
Get going. So we are going to go through the corporate services area next, and welcome, Cheryl. We look forward to the information and the presentation. I just want to remind members of council, the presentations are available through the eScribe, so if you want to follow along on a PDF version of it or something, you can get it there. And the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Adams. And through you, I'm pleased to present the budget for Corporate Services Commission to you today. So the mandate of Corporate Services is to strengthen, support, and protect the organization. We do this by providing essential internal services that enable every department to function effectively. We strengthen the organization by ensuring sound governance, financial health, and strategic alignment. This creates a strong backbone for service delivery and innovation across the organization. Support means being a reliable partner to every department. We provide services through each of the departments listed on this slide, being HR, IT, finance, legal, communications, customer service, and regulatory services that keep the organization running smoothly. Protection is about risk management, compliance, and accountability. We ensure legal and regulatory obligations are met, data is secure, and public trust is maintained. This protects not just the organization, but the community we serve. The foundation of our leadership approach is to lead with integrity. We are committed to delivering strategic and administrative leadership that is not only effective, but also principled. This builds a culture of accountability and ethical decision-making. Trust is earned through consistent, responsible action. We meet our legal, financial, technological, and labor obligations. This protects the town's reputation and ensures operational stability. We build public confidence and engage the public through clear, accessible communication. Multi-channel outreach helps us connect with all residents, and this strengthens trust and reinforces the town's brand. The core programs delivered by the Corporate Services Commission are outlined on this slide, with the corresponding tab where you can find details in the budget document. Each of these programs plays a vital role in supporting the town's operations, governance, and service delivery, and ensures that every department has the tools, support, and governance needed to serve the community effectively. So on behalf of the team in Corporate Services, I'm proud to highlight just some of the accomplishments and initiatives we've completed this past year that align with Council's strategic priorities. To start off, our legal services team played a key role in supporting the Midtown Official Plan Amendment and the town's response to the province's transit-oriented communities initiative. Our contributions helped to support sustainable urban growth and livability. We've also laid the groundwork for sustainable growth by conducting an RFP for a new development charges background study. The study will ensure our development charges are aligned with future infrastructure needs and legislative requirements. It's a foundational tool to support responsible, well-planned growth across the town. We've been securing key properties that position the town for long-term service expansion, and that includes 445 Cornwall Road, supporting Midtown planning and assisting the Humane Society's search for a new home. 1132 South Service Road West, expanding capacity near central operations. And 4.9 acres at Trafalgar and Burnhamthorpe, securing a potential future community center site. These acquisitions position the town for long-term growth and service expansion. We've also resolved appeals related to Palermo and Argo Trafalgar, removing barriers to development and advancing planning certainty. Under the priority of community belonging, we completed a comprehensive engagement process to inform the development of a customer experience strategy. This work is about more than service. It's about fostering a sense of belonging and inclusion. The strategy will guide how we deliver services that are accessible, responsive, and resident-focused. Through our online property tax portal, Service Oakville provides digital service that makes it easier for residents to access their tax information anytime, anywhere. This is a great example of how we're modernizing service delivery to meet evolving expectations. And we've developed significant new bylaws that have been approved by Council, including the safe access to places of worship, towing without the vehicle owner's consent, and vehicle immobilization prohibition. These reflect our responsiveness to emerging community needs and our role in protecting public interest. This year, we supported the development of a new stormwater funding structure and fee model. This work is part of our broader asset management strategy and ensures long-term sustainable investment in critical stormwater infrastructure. It reflects our commitment to environmental sustainability and climate resilience, protecting both the community and the environment. We also progressed on many initiatives that align with the strategic goal of accountable government. We conducted application restore and disaster recovery testing to ensure our information technology systems can be restored quickly and reliably. This proactive work strengthens our business continuity and protects critical services from disruption. We launched a new property tax system, including a resident-facing portal. This system enhances transparency and gives residents easier access to their tax information, supporting a more modern, user-friendly experience. In response to tariff-related threats, we worked with the Tariff Task Force and updated the town's procurement bylaw while maintaining fairness and transparency in our approach. We launched a social media campaign showcasing the people behind the scenes, our town staff. You may have seen this series of videos titled What You See versus What It Takes on the town's Instagram page. These videos showcase the installation and maintenance of ice pads, road construction, setting up for community events, operation of our community centers, and the planting of our garden beds, and highlight the dedication and professionalism of our teams, building public awareness, trust, and appreciation. We advanced key priorities in the 2025 People Plan, focusing on workforce development, our wellness plan, creating promotional materials for recruitment, and enhancing career development tools. These efforts strengthen our internal culture and position us to better serve the community. Earlier this year, we completed a Lean Green Belt project focused on improving the town's bylaw management and writing process, and launched our popular and consolidated bylaws page on the town's website. The resources created through this project promote consistency, clarity, and accessibility of all staff involved in bylaw creation. Establishing this foundation not only streamlines internal processes and reduces waste, but also strengthens the quality and usability of our public-facing bylaw search site. Some of our key highlights from 2025 are listed on the next two slides, and they include, in 2025, our security systems have automatically blocked 99.9% of email threats, including spam and malicious content. This reflects our strong commitment to protecting staff and organizational data while maintaining a secure digital environment. Recognizing the growing role of AI, we developed and implemented AI guidelines to ensure responsible and ethical use of artificial intelligence across the organization. And we've rolled out the free version of Microsoft 365 Copilot to all staff. These guidelines help us balance innovation with accountability. We successfully completed a disaster recovery and failover test, ensuring our systems can be restored quickly and reliably in the event of disruption. This proactive measure strengthens our business continuity and safeguards critical services. Our ITS team has handled almost 13,000 service requests year to date, or about 3.7 requests per employee. This is a decrease from 5.8 requests per employee in 2024, demonstrating the responsiveness of our technology support services. We delivered a strong year of inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility, or IDEA, training. Over 1,600 staff participated, with more than 500 attending in-person sessions and over 1,000 completing e-learning modules. This reflects our commitment to building an inclusive and equitable workplace culture. Our communications team was very active in 2025, issuing 23 editions of e-news, 115 news releases, and achieving 12% growth in our social media followers. These efforts helped keep residents informed and engaged while strengthening the town's brand and public trust. We saw strong uptake of the town's new online tax portal, with many residents signing up to access their property tax information digitally. This shift supports our goal of modernizing service delivery and improving accessibility. As we look ahead to 2026, several key factors are shaping our budget planning across corporate services. The need to upgrade IT infrastructure, software, and cybersecurity tools continues to grow. Projects like cloud backup, software as a service or SaaS migration, and identity management systems are essential to maintaining secure and resilient operations, but require significant investment. Residents increasingly expect faster, more accessible, and digital-first services. Initiatives like Service Oakville and the online tax portal are examples of how we're responding. Continued investment in customer experience strategies and digital platforms are needed to ensure the town is meeting these demands. New or amended legislation can require updates to systems or processes. Regulatory mandates like development charge exemptions, compliance with accessibility standards, or privacy and security standards directly impact budget allocations and operational planning. Urban expansion in areas like Midtown Oakville and Bronte Village increases demand for legal services and infrastructure funding. Development-related studies and land acquisition strategies require upfront investment to support sustainable growth. Inflationary pressures, collective bargaining, and recruitment challenges influence HR budgets. Initiatives like talent management, modernization, wellness programs, and idea training require sustained funding. Our budget planning is aligned with Council's strategic priorities. Communications, engagement, and transparency initiatives are often prioritized to build public trust and ensure accountability. We continue to identify opportunities for operational efficiency, automation, and savings, such as streamlining our employee onboarding process and AP software automation. These initiatives help offset budget pressures and reduce long-term costs. Together, these influences reflect our commitment to responsible stewardship, strategic investment, and continuous improvement. So as we prepare for 2026, our focus remains on advancing Council's strategic initiatives. In support of responsible growth management, we're getting started on our DC background study update to support the calculation of the town's development charges. This ensures infrastructure funding tools are aligned with legislative requirements, and future needs will help us plan for sustainable growth while maintaining financial accountability. We'll be completing Phase 2 of the land acquisition and disposition strategy for Council approval to support strategic growth and community planning. We'll continue to support planning and development in the preparation of a community planning permit system bylaw and inclusionary zoning for Midtown Oakville and Bronte Village. We're excited to finalize and implement the customer experience strategy in 2026. This strategy will foster a more inclusive, responsive, and resident-focused service model, one that reflects the diverse needs of our community and builds a stronger sense of community belonging. We'll continue to support the implementation of the town's stormwater program for billing and credits. This initiative ensures the long-term sustainable investment in critical systems that protect our community and natural environment. Maintaining the integrity and security of our information technology infrastructure remains a top priority. We're continuing to strengthen our systems to safeguard data ensure operational continuity, and support secure service delivery. Some key initiatives that we'll be undertaking are transitioning the town's website to SaaS hosting to improve availability, security, and ease of maintenance. We'll be enforcing mandatory multi-factor authentication, and we're implementing a modern cloud backup solution to enhance data protection and ensure rapid recovery in case of disruptions. We're investing in a lifecycle replacement of our storage area network infrastructure to ensure our systems remain robust and capable of supporting the town's growing digital needs. And as we continue to explore AI applications, we'll be conducting an AI security readiness assessment. This will help us identify potential risks and ensure we're prepared to use AI responsibly and securely. We'll also identify and implement opportunities for continuous improvement at Service Oakville, refining processes and enhancing service delivery to best meet residents' needs. We'll continue to prepare the annual budget and financial forecast to ensure the town's long-term financial sustainability. This is essential for strategic planning and responsible stewardship of public funds. We'll also be preparing for the 2026 municipal election, ensuring the necessary systems, resources, and governance supports are in place for a smooth and transparent process. And finally, we're modernizing our talent and performance management practices, enhancing performance evaluations, launching on-demand learning, and improving recruitment to attract top diverse talent. Operational improvements and cost-saving measures implemented across corporate services play a key role in supporting the town's financial sustainability. As you heard in the previous presentations this morning, we've identified almost $400,000 in savings in the 2026 budget, contributing to the overall $600,000 direction from Council for 2026 and 27. Almost $200,000 of this, as you heard this morning, is a result of streamlining our software contracts and licensing in information technology, resulting in meaningful savings without compromising functionality or support. We've also identified other savings through the budget process and opportunities for efficiency through lean projects, such as a joint procurement initiative where we've joined the province's cell phone plan, which has reduced costs while maintaining service quality. This is a good example of how we leverage external partnerships for internal efficiency. A recent lean review of our recruitment process identified opportunities to simplify, standardize, and automate key steps. These changes are expected to yield a 30% overall efficiency gain, reducing administrative burden and improving the experience for both hiring managers and candidates. Through another lean initiative, we've enhanced employee onboarding so that 100% of new hires are fully prepared to begin work on their first day. This ensures a smooth transition and immediate productivity. Another lean process review of bylaw management, as Director Clark mentioned this morning, has identified process improvements and training and anticipates a 75% error reduction rate in bylaw creation and management, supporting both internal consistency and public transparency. And our final lean review resulted in implementing a standardization and communication plan that enables 100% of print requests to be completed in-house, reducing outsourcing costs and improving turnaround times. So looking now at our operating budget for corporate services, our 2026 budget supports Council's strategic priorities through targeted investments across all corporate services departments. Operating funds support service delivery in the areas of governance and legislative compliance, digital security, financial stewardship of public funds, workforce development, inclusive service delivery, and communications that build public trust. Capital investments support growth management, infrastructure modernization, and expanded online service. These investments reflect our commitment to efficiency, accountability, and service excellence. Our gross operating budget for 2026 is $46.47 million, which represents 9% of the town's gross operating budget. This reflects the full cost of delivering corporate services programs and services to support the organization. After factoring in revenues and recoveries, our net operating budget is $40.21 million. This is the amount funded through the tax levy and represents our direct impact on the town's financial plan. These figures reflect our commitment to strategic investment, balancing service excellence with fiscal responsibility. The Corporate Services Commission's net operating budget of $40.21 million for 2026 is distributed across various program areas. Overall, the budget reflects a $2.19 million increase over 2025. Each program allocation reflects our commitment to Council's strategic priorities and providing internal services to the organization. Under the program area of regulatory services, this team is provided by the Clerk's Department and addresses a variety of functions in accordance with provincial legislative requirements, municipal bylaws, and council direction. The budget for this program is increasing over 2025, mostly due to the addition of staffing for corporate records and data management support, as well as an increase in part-time hours to digitize public records and respond to public requests for information. Legal services ensures the town's interests are protected. This budget is increasing 3.4% over 2025, largely due to inflationary and contractual increases. Increases to this program budget are offset by reductions based on the provincial direction for the removal of the automated speed enforcement program. Communications and Customer Experience program area provides high-quality communications and customer experience that inform and engage the community. The budget for this program is increasing 5% over 2025, mainly due to inflationary adjustments and the addition of part-time hours for customer service representatives for Service Oakville to address increasing service demands and ensure we continue to provide exceptional service to the community. The program budget for political governance supports the activities of mayor and council committees and the 2026 municipal election. The budget increase for this program is largely due to the annualization of a legislative compliance specialist that was approved in the 2025 budget and costs related to the upcoming election, offset by a transfer from the election reserve. Human Resources budget provides resources directed toward organizational development, employee and labor relations, and health, safety, and wellness of our employees. The budget increase of 9% is largely due to an increase to membership dues and subscriptions. This request also includes the conversion of a contract position to permanent full-time for a senior consultant of employee and labor relations. Financial Services program budget provides an investment to ensure sound fiscal management, oversight, and long-term sustainability of the town. The budget increase is primarily due to the addition of 2 supervisor positions, one in the property assessment team to protect the town's assessment base, and one in procurement to strengthen procurement oversight, offset by internal recoveries from capital projects. And finally, the largest portion of corporate services budget is required for information technology solutions. This funding supports digital infrastructure, cybersecurity, and disaster recovery, critical for operational continuity. The increase of 6% over 2025 is due to operating impacts of previously approved capital projects, increases to contracted service for software maintenance and software as a service, for increased capacity and security. This budget also includes a new security architect to ensure greatest security of the town's data, systems, and infrastructure. The new operating requests included in the 2026 budget are summarized on this slide and reflect the evolving needs of the organization. These requests are aligned with strategic priorities across corporate services and support service excellence, resilience, and responsible growth. Looking to the capital budget, our 2026 capital budget totals $10.7 million, representing 3% of the town's overall capital program. These investments focus on growth management and IT infrastructure upgrades like cloud backup, website enhancements, and lifecycle replacements to ensure secure, resilient, and scalable service delivery. These upgrades are essential to maintaining the internal systems that support all departments. The $10.7 million capital budget is required to support growth in the town and ensure continued support for service delivery across all departments. Over half of the capital program is allocated for the town's obligation to fund DC exemptions. The Development Charges Act requires municipalities to use non-development charge funding sources to fund the development charges that are otherwise payable, and the town uses capital reserves to fund these exemptions. Exemptions fluctuate year to year based on actual development activity, but are forecast to be approximately $5.4 million annually. The capital budget under finance also includes funding for replacement of accounts payable automation software, which will result in efficiencies across the organization. A further investment of $4.7 million in IT infrastructure upgrades includes a cloud backup solution, website enhancements, and lifecycle replacements of hardware and software. These upgrades are foundational to secure, resilient, and scalable service delivery and ensures that staff across all departments have the tools and systems they need to serve the community effectively. The Communications and Customer Experience capital funding supports a public identity and access management implementation plan and expansion of online services on the town's website. These initiatives improve digital access, security, and resident experience. The capital budget under political governance provides an investment in replacement of equipment in the print shop. The 2026 capital budget reflects our commitment to modernization, efficiency, and strategic growth. These investments ensure that our internal systems remain robust and responsive, enabling every department to serve the community effectively. Capital projects planned for 2026 support the strategic priority of accountable government. These initiatives meet legislative requirements and modernize infrastructure, enhance digital services, and strengthen cybersecurity across the organization. Together, these capital projects reflect our commitment to advancing infrastructure, accountability, and strategic growth. And finally, on September 24th, the Budget Committee requested a report on Service Oakville's performance, including key performance indicators and service channel metrics. This slide provides this information along with trending data for each KPI. An upward arrow noted in the right column on this slide indicates an increasing trend, whereas a downward arrow is a decreasing trend, and the arrow pointing to the side indicates a neutral trend. In terms of the color coding, green indicates it's a positive trend, whereas red needs improvement and yellow is cautionary and something we're keeping an eye on. So with that context, as of September 30th, total call volume reached 75,135, averaging 402 calls per day. Of those, 59,033 were answered with an average of 316 calls per day. The call abandonment rate is currently 15% as of the end of September, which is higher than our target of 5% and up from 11% in 2024. But I'm happy to share that that statistic has improved, and we're now sitting at 4.4% as of October. The increase that was there as of September was driven by staffing transitions, the February snowstorm, and the launch of the new tax portal, which shifted demand towards digital channels. In terms of call handling metrics, our service level, defined as 80% of calls answered within 30 seconds, is currently at 53%. And as of October, that has improved to 84%. With new staff now fully trained and call volumes expected to slow seasonally, we anticipate further improvement in this area. The average call handling time is 3 minutes and 58 seconds, reflecting our commitment to helping residents navigate online services, even if it means longer calls. First call resolution, or FCR, is at 52%, showing room for improvement in resolving inquiries at the first point of contact. We've seen strong engagement through alternative service channels, with 12,880 email inquiries, 10,592 online interactions, and 2,288 in-person counter visits. These figures show a continued shift towards digital service, while in-person visits remain comparatively low. Our case closure rate within service level is 86%, and the average time to close a service request has dropped to 8 business days, down from 11 in 2024. We continually monitor these metrics, which help us monitor performance, identify areas for improvement, and ensure we're meeting resident expectations across all service channels. There were 2 specific requests from the Budget Committee that were addressed as part of the 2026 budget process. I addressed the first one here, to report on Service Oakville's performance, including the KPIs on the previous slide, with detailed metrics on call volumes, service levels, and digital engagement. Information on services provided in person and access to staff in building and zoning was provided in Appendix L to the 2026 operating and capital budget report that's on today's agenda. Budget Committee also requested information on the level of gapping included in the budget and whether it suggests any permanent changes in staffing levels. This has been addressed in Appendix P, which outlines gapping assumptions and their impact on staffing. And with that, Chair Adams, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions? Wow, it looks like you've done a fabulous job. Okay, we've got a couple questions.
You spoke too fast.
Just too fast. We can all hope. Councillor Haslett Thiel, followed by Councillor Lischner.
Thank you very much for the presentation. You mentioned AP automation. So is that an accomplishment in 2025, or is that occurring in 2026? And does that enable you to redeploy financial talent for other supports?
Thank you for that great question. The AP automation software is something that we're looking at upgrading in 2026. It will provide greater efficiencies within the continuum of the AP process for staff all across the organization, making sure that we're processing payments efficiently, and will hopefully provide some capacity for staff to redirect efforts to other activities through efficiencies gained through that new software.
Okay, thank you for that answer. My other question is just around number of consultants in each department. So there's a fair reliance on consultant expertise across the organization, and I'm wondering where the public or I or council could get information on our percentage of spend on consultants and some additional information on the support that they provide.
We can certainly, through you, Councillor Adams, we can certainly get that information to council. Just to clarify, are you referring to consultants that we hire like an external firm, or are you talking about staff that we have on like a contract basis? I think you mean the consultants that we hire, but I just want to confirm that.
I'd like to understand both, but more critically, it's the outsourcing of work that whether it's for expertise or for capacity, and how it affects each department. And one of my other questions just around headcount and org charts. So if my memory corrects me, we just got the books this morning. There'll be a tab that tells us FTEs against 24, 25, and then 26. Will we see actual org charts in the book?
Thank you for that question through you, Councillor Adams. The FTE charts are provided in tab 30 of the budget document. So there is further information on that. We have not provided information on the org charts for each department within the budget document.
So if we have specific questions about, as a result of reviewing staff levels in 24 to 25, 25 to 26, do we need to independently then ask for those org charts? Because we moved some headcount around last year. We tend to do that at budget, and understanding where they've all landed and how they impact our operating costs, I think is something we should understand better.
Thank you, and through you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Haslett-Thiel, I realize you just got the budget document today, so when you have a chance to look at it, the information in tab 30 does talk about some of the reallocations and adjustments that have been made between departments. And I know within the business plan details for each program area, it also mentions if there's been reallocations between departments. So if that information is helpful, hopefully you can find your answers there. If not, please reach out to me and I'd be happy to get you any further information that you feel you need that's not already included in the budget document.
Okay, thank you very much.
So just to clarify, so in the business materials for each of the areas, there is the staffing overview that does include the adjustments and reallocations of staff, which there's a verbal description of each of the positions that move around, and the summary material is in the appendix in under tab 30 as you described. And so the thing that isn't there is an FTE by FTE org chart that says exactly what the job title is in each of the departments. So if that's something that you're searching for, then I suggest that you have a conversation with staff about it.
Understood, Chair.
Councillor Lischina, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that presentation. First of all, just to clarify, the definition for call abandonment is how many seconds or minutes?
Sorry, through you, Councillor Adams, call abandonment was 15% at the end of September. It has improved since then, and we're currently sitting at about 4.4%, which is a positive increase in that trend.
Yes, no, I was happy to hear that. I'm not sure, I can't remember what call abandonment means. Like, how long is someone on the phone before they drop it?
Thank you. And through you,
and we can get that later, that's okay. My larger question, in beginning of your presentation, you discussed about digital first services, and looking into in your departments, but I guess this is a question more to all the commission is, are there any departments in any of the commissions that are behind adoption of the digital first sort of policy, and would the reasons for that be because of change management or resourcing? or any other reason? So I guess particular to yours, but this would be a question to all commissioners.
Thank you. And through you, Councillor Adams. I think in terms of digital services, it's an area that's constantly evolving. The AI guidelines is something that has become more prevalent in the last few years. So we try to stay aware and abreast of those changes as they're coming forward and implement changes as quickly as we can, making sure that we maintain the security and safety of our systems and our data. So we do endeavor to do digital first services as much as we can and staying abreast of those trends, but also not always wanting to be the first one out of the gate and making sure that everything is safe and secure before we proceed with making any of those types of service enhancements.
Satisfied? Councillor? I think she's done. Okay. Councillor Giddings, so move on to you then.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I appreciate the presentation. The FCR of 52%, what are some of the drivers that don't allow it to be handled the first time? Are they more complex? Are there longer stories associated with the resident explaining it? Just curious.
Thank you, Councillor Giddings, and through you, Councillor Adams. Some of those examples you provided would be correct. Sometimes we need to work with other departments in order to get an answer to provide back to the customer. So there may be some investigation and contacts that we need to do in order to provide information back. So sometimes that process can just take a little bit longer and we're not able to answer the call or the questions on the first call. So we'd have to get back to the customer.
So in an ideal world, would you receive a lot more emails from residents rather than phone calls to allow it to be spread out throughout the day, avoid the peaks, fill in the valleys, that kind of thing?
Thank you, and through you, Councillor Adams. I think we're able to answer inquiries, whether it's by phone or email. We're happy to have residents and people in the community contact us and ask us those questions. I think where we can improve first call resolution, and it's something we're working on, is building our knowledge base articles that our customer service representatives have access to. So we have knowledge base articles, so when a caller calls in and asks a question, our customer service representatives can quickly call up that information and provide an answer, hopefully on that first call. It's typically when we need to do some type of follow-up with another department on a specific issue where it might take a little more time. But we are working on looking at our knowledge base articles and other things like that to improve our service delivery and improve the first call resolution numbers.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Hazat-Thiel, your floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm back. So a few other questions. I just wanted to go back to the 4.4% that you stated for October. So that's a pretty significant change from what you were reporting. What was implemented or fundamentally changed that that is something that you might want to commit is the standard going forward?
Thank you, and through you, Councillor Adams. I think the change in that statistic is in large part seasonal factors. So at the beginning of the year, we had a lot of calls related to the snowstorms that happened in February. We had some staffing turnover at the early part of the year, so it meant that we didn't have as many customer service representatives on the phones, or they weren't as fully trained. So we've been really working hard to train those new staff and get them up to full capacity in answering calls. And I feel now we're at a point where we're staffed and we have people trained, so we are able to respond to questions more quickly, which is part of the reason why that trend has improved over the past month.
Okay, thank you. That's a great answer. I'm curious about the staffing levels at Service Oakville. As you're aware, Council has been directed that we need to put all our requests that come from residents to us through Service Oakville. we have a heavy reliance then on that turnaround time to respond and to keep us informed on the status of how it's moving through its allocation to different departments. Is the part-time headcount that I think you've asked for sufficient to ensure that the public is getting the service levels that we rely on you for, and equally important, that the staff feel supported to deliver the quality of service on the phone or by email?
Thank you, and through you, Councillor Adams, I appreciate that question, Councillor Haslett-Thiel, and Council's support in making sure that the Service Oakville area is resourced so that we can provide effective service delivery. The 2026 budget does include additional part-time hours for CSRs so that we can continue to make improvements in that area. The executive leadership team recognizes that's an area where we needed to focus some improvements, so they have provided additional resources in the 2026 budget. You will also see, as Director Vanderheiden included in his presentation this morning, there was a list of other things that we were not able to include in the 2026 budget, and they've been allocated in 27 and 28. That included additional hours for Service Oakville, as we see a need to continue to grow that service area and the staffing as the town continues to grow. So we do have resources allocated in 2026 budget, as well as identified in the forecast as well.
Okay, thank you. And just shifting a little bit, over the past few years, I've asked about how we are developing internally the talent to move through the system to retain the talent. And I note that the turnover numbers are low, and there's always multiple factors why your turnover numbers are declining. But is there a implemented system for enabling individuals who demonstrate the interest and the performance level to grow their capabilities, so we retain them and we have their knowledge ongoingly?
Thank you, and through you, Councillor Adams, I'm going to turn to our Director of HR, Susan Ashmore, to help me answer that question. But as I mentioned in one of my slides, we have been looking at our processes and doing a lean review on many aspects of our HR processes, and I think Susan will be able to speak to that more and give you some of the specific details that you're looking for.
I'd be happy to. Through you, Chair Adams and Councillor Haslett-Thiel, thank you for the question. We've been working quite a bit of late through our people plan exercises to modernize our performance management systems and to deal with a succession framework and a workforce planning framework, all of which are now in place, and we are continuing to enhance. And we just rolled out some career development guidelines and some tools for our teams through conversations, etc. So all of that work is in progress and in place.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Adams.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's all the questions on this presentation. So I'm going to have us go on to the community development presentation with Michael Mizzi. That'll be the last one of the day, so we should have enough time to finish that up by around 2:30, I hope. And that'll bring us to a recess point until Thursday morning, when we'll hear the community infrastructure and community service presentations. And my hope is that we'll be able to finish that by lunchtime or thereabouts on Thursday. So by working through you today, it'll free up our afternoons on Thursday, I hope. All yours.
Thank you, Chair Adams. Community Development Commission. So who are we? Our commission consists of 4 departments: building services, economic development, municipal enforcement, and planning and development. What's our mandate? To create a safe, thriving, and inclusive community. What do we do in the Community Development Commission? Our work focuses on guiding how Oakville physically evolves, We set the framework that supports responsible growth and investment through policies, programs, and regulations. And we play a key role in promoting sustainability and economic vitality and ensuring bylaws are followed to maintain Oakville's high quality of life. Programs we deliver. Our work covers a range of services that shape how Oakville grows and functions. We plan new communities so they are livable, well-designed, and fit within the town's long-term goals. We make sure construction across Oakville is compliant and meets standards, protecting both residents and property. We support a strong local economy by helping businesses start, grow, and invest here. We help keep neighborhoods maintained and orderly through fair enforcement and related public education and collaboration. And we manage parking systems and facilities to support access to local destinations. What we advanced in 2025, under the Growth Management Strategic Priority, some examples. We finalized the public realm framework and new streetscape designs for Bronte and Kerr villages, setting the stage for more vibrant, people-focused districts. Council approved the new 5-year economic development plan in May. Implementation is underway, including a business retention and expansion program launched this last month. And we recently completed the housing needs assessment to guide future planning and support more housing options, including affordable. Under the community belonging strategic priority, we are completing the 3rd year of the film pilot project with 19 productions and 110 filming days, strengthening Oakville's film-friendly reputation. The old Oakville Heritage Conservation District was finalized to protect historic character. And we led broad engagement on key policy initiatives to ensure community voices help inform future growth. Under environmental sustainability, we introduced the Sedgwick Trail Coyote Coexistence Pilot, limiting dogs on part of the trail during denning season. With strong community support, coyote-related reports dropped noticeably from last year. We played our part in advancing the Climate Action Plan. For example, we always try and encourage more walkable communities when we talk to applicants. Under accountable government, we secured $13 million from the province through the Building Faster Fund, and with the Short-Term Rental Enforcement Fund, we achieved greater compliance through enforcement. Also, and a common theme today, we expanded our digital approach and tools, including a new Invest Oakville LinkedIn social media strategy. Some highlights in statistics for 2025. Oakville's office vacancy rate dropped to 15.7% this year, our lowest in 5 years and below the GTA West average. We cut bylaw investigation times by 10%, now averaging 20 days. Staff held, so far, 53 public engagement sessions, most of these done through planning and development. And building services issued permits for 1,586 dwelling units as of September. Growth and investment continues in Oakville, even in an Ontario housing market that is weak. Budget influences. We're seeing some decline in development activity, but files received are more complex, affecting both fee revenue and project timing. At the same time, we're investing in technology for improvements, such as project docs in building services to streamline processing workflows. Inspection volume and the types of matters that municipal enforcement is being asked to work on stretches that department's resources. We're continuing to adapt to ongoing, almost nonstop, changes in provincial legislation which have a direct impact on how we plan, build, and deliver the services of this commission. Key actions for 2026, again, by strategic priority. Under growth management, planning and development is advancing the official plan review, including key studies and integration of the North Oakville East Secondary Plan. We will complete the municipal enforcement operational plan review to establish clear work plan priorities. We will continue rollout of the economic development plan with an annual business survey launching in 2026. Under community belonging, staff will complete Heritage Conservation District reviews for both the downtown and Trafalgar Road. Both building services and municipal enforcement will expand education on bylaw compliance and safety. And staff will be enhancing the seasonal patio programs, adding a new stream for private lands. Continuing, under environmental sustainability, staff will update the Brownfields Community Improvement Plan to support uptake and make incentives more effective. We will advance intensification near transit to support connected growth and a better modal split. And we want to strengthen wildlife management, including completing an animal control feasibility study. Under accountable government, the Commission wants to expand consultation wherever possible on planning and development applications. You cannot over-consult. We want to stay focused and improve case management of application files for both faster response and better service. Savings and efficiencies. The Community Development Commission has focused on greater collaboration between departments, process review improvements, and technology enhancements. During this last year, for example, we introduced e-plan improvements to building services. We also simplified the pool permit process review to create 2 streams and reduced application fees. On to our 2026 budget proposal. This slide shows the 2026 budget by strategic priority. The net operating budget for the Commission, totaling $8.7 million, is fully allocated to growth management. The capital budget, at almost $3 million, is primarily directed to growth management, with approximately 4% supporting accountable government. This next slide breaks down the operating budget in a little more detail. From the town's total gross operating budget, about $43 million, or 8%, is attributed to community development. When we look at this on a net basis, community development represents $8.7 million, or roughly 3% of the town's overall net operating budget. Looking next at the 2026 tax levy by program, within community development, the majority is applicable to planning and development at $5.2 million, up slightly from 2025. Municipal enforcement follows with smaller allocations for economic development and building services. Parking as a program remains fee supported with no levy impact. New operating requests in 2026. For building services, and following an organizational review this year and an analysis on how sections within that department could work better together, we propose to repurpose some vacancies and add new FTEs focused on growing capacity within the department. This initiative is fully funded through building permit revenues. For the film pilot program, Council recently approved extending the pilot for 3 more years. This includes a dedicated staff position, development of a film strategy, and a small operational budget for marketing and outreach. The goal is to build on Oakville's strong reputation as a filming destination. And the first year funding, about $188,000, will come from the Tax Stabilization Reserve. On to the capital budget review. Turning now to the 2026 capital budget, a total of $2.97 million is allocated to community development, representing a pretty small, just under 1% of the town's overall capital program. That $2.97 million includes $2.11 million for growth-related studies and housing action plan work in planning and development, $560,000 for parking infrastructure improvements, $180,000 for online licensing software and MES, and $120,000 for 2 building inspector vehicles. The 2026 capital project highlights. For Midtown, $700,000 will complete the final implementation phase. The project was extended to 2026 to finish key technical work. For implementation of the Housing Action Plan, $700,000 supports ongoing work by the Housing Secretariat, including studies for the Bronte Go area, Sheridan College, and policies to advance gentle density and affordable housing. And for E-Plan, for planning and development, $600,000 will expand our digital systems, including Project Docs and the Amanda Case Management System, to streamline plan review and improve customer service. As many of you probably know, the community planning permit system will also be set up and depend on these same technologies. Council requests. Requests by Council for a response on support for affordable housing initiatives and KPIs associated with the tracking of services provided in person in the building and zoning areas can be found in Appendix I and L, respectively. And with that, I thank you. My team and I would be pleased to take your questions. Thank you.
Great. We're going to start with Councillor Howlett-Thiel and go to Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair Adams. Thank you for sharing all of the last year's efforts and the plans. And I was happy to hear at the end that you've got CPPS on the work plan pending its potential approval. I do have so a compliment and then a harder question. So after 2 years of asking, I am thrilled to see that there will be new additional headcount in building services to support increased capacity. What I'd like to understand is what are the metrics and how will those metrics be reported out so we truly have a clear picture of how long it is taking for building permits, pool permits, and to get through the the system, recognizing that there's uniquenesses, et cetera, and there'll always have to be an asterisk. Will we be able to get to some metrics so we're not overwhelmed with all the negative, and we actually understand how long it is taking, on average, to get a building permit?
I thank you very much for that question through Chair Adams. That is a question for we and I want an answer to as well. In building services, project docs, sort of that workflow system tool was brought on stream late this last winter. The chief building official could probably outline this better than me, but as I understand it, and I've worked with it a little bit with staff, it has had some growing pains and glitches as it got initiated. And data has not been run to date on sort of timeframes between when a project's deemed complete and received and when a permit is issued. However, just this last week, that request was made, given now we're 9 months into project docs. We spent the first 3, 4, 5 months getting the system to work better. Let's look at the last 6 months of data. So we will hopefully have that kind of information for you shortly.
Okay, so thank you for that, and thank you for being on the same wavelength. I'm a bit concerned about the quality of that software, and is it part of what the planning department is going to rely on as well, or is that my misunderstanding of the two different softwares?
Through you, Chair. No, you are not misunderstanding this. However, we're learning lessons from what happened with building services, and when E-Plan, and it will be implemented primarily through project docs, comes on stream through 2026, we'll hopefully make some improvements, probably to the chagrin of some of my staff. I've sat down with a number of them over the last several months and said, hey, pretend I'm an applicant, take me through the pool permit process. I want to understand what you see on the screen, what an applicant sees on the screen. I'll admit this could be my own naivety or my age or something along those lines. I did find it a little complex. However, I did note that the staff seemed to work through the system very well. But it does beg the question, do applicants fully understand the system? Can we better educate? Can we streamline it a little more? And that's what the Building Services Division under Ralph Kaminsky, and when it comes on stream in planning and development, we're going to improve on it.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. It does lead me to Appendix L. And respectfully, it is time that we invest the time in having a consistent approach to providing in-person service, or being 100% clear that, you know, when you file, if you would like to book an appointment to come in, we will be here, we will be available. Because the number of calls and concerns I regularly get is there wasn't somebody available. The call took, it took 2 days to get a response. And I'm not being critical of staff that may not have the resources that they need, or the care or commitment that they have to what they do. I think everybody gets up most days to do a great job. But the individuals who want to build, the individuals who want to move it along feel incredibly frustrated they cannot get to someone. And I see the data that says only a certain number of people asked. They leave frustrated. And those are folks that are a future taxpayer or a current taxpayer who wants to be a part of Oakville. So if at all possible, in that 7 additional capacity, if we could have a structure that enables somebody to clearly know we are here to answer your questions, I think the public would appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation, Commissioner. On slide 7, where you talked about the highlights from 2025, it was 1,586 new dwelling unit starts. How do we compare that? Is that up from last year, up from 2 years? Is it down? Where does that sit in terms of our trend line?
There's no question that development activity has slowed in the last year or two. And I'll give you an example in planning. So we're on target to maybe receive 50 planning applications this year. 2024 was around 60, 65. The planning applications are generally smaller in scale this year. They're kind of smaller projects, as you know. It certainly affected your ward. Bigger mid-rises, taller buildings, there's a complete stop on that kind of thing. We are nonetheless getting in permit applications through building to finish projects that may have been planning approved or council approved a couple years ago. So that 1586 is definitely less than previous years. It's probably not going to be more than this up to September next year, same to date time frame, but hopefully within a couple years this starts turning around.
Okay, thanks. And I guess I'm asking that question because it speaks to the FTEs we're going to be hiring for building services, which are funded through the permitting system. And I think, as the CAO explained earlier, if we have a gap year, there's a permit reserve that we can dip into. But are we setting ourselves up to try and pay for these new 7 FTEs when the trend for how they're going to get paid is dipping downwards?
Through you, Chair Adams, I don't see that as an issue, Councillor, at this time. We have a pretty strong building reserve account right now. The revenues do adequately cover the expenses of the department, and we do look to see things slowly turning around in the next year or so. I'm not myself, nor is the chief building official, that concerned about that question.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And just to sort of piggyback off of what Councillor Hazat-Thiel was talking about, in terms of project docs or an E-plan, I know they use the same software in Mississauga, and I've had discussions with developers who say the online portal in Mississauga works great. We track where the status is. We know who has it in that department. And I think maybe we're gapping a little bit in terms of how we're utilizing it. And I guess my question is, a lot of this has to do with how we communicate back to applicants to let them know where things are in the queue and these sorts of things. So if we can make sure that whatever we need to do in there from a communication standpoint to applicants, I think is important. And I say this, I was speaking with the department and we had fire prevention week, and I guess nobody from fire services was able to finish one application because they were busy and nobody knew that. And I think that's where the frustration comes. So I'm hoping that we can focus some of our spending on making sure that there's a communication element with people. Half the time they're wrong when they contact me and they say, it's been sitting on a desk somewhere. And I talk to our staff and they're like, no, we just got it 3 days ago. So I get it that it happens all the time like that. But I think there's a communication gap in this. And I don't know whether this software has the ability to keep people up to date nonstop on where their application is and what's next and what the expectation from timelines is. I think that's just the big thing. It just goes into a void and they don't know and they don't hear. And I think that's where the frustrations lie. So anyway, if we can just keep that in mind. And then just one last question on slide 15 in terms of the tax levy by program. Why is there a reduction in municipal enforcement this year from last year?
I
think it's slide 15.
Yeah, I mean, the tax levy is a relatively small proportion of the dollars spent in the commission. A lot of how we finance our expenditures comes through various permit application fees, etc. But where it is down a little bit, almost fully has to do with where we are in a particular year or portion of that year in terms of hiring. Are we carrying a little more vacancies than we should have this year versus last year, et cetera? And those differences primarily reflect staffing and benefit dollars.
Okay, but it's not going to be...
Councillor O'Meara, I believe in MES, I think you're referring to the ASC reduction.
I don't know. I'm just looking at slide 15 in terms of.
I believe that's where the reduction is.
Okay, it's from the ASC then?
Okay.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Elgar?
Thank you, through Chair Carter. Thanks for the presentation. And last night at council, I mentioned it, but I'm thinking since you're the head guy, do you have adequate staff with the expertise and knowledge to carry out the responsibilities that were taken away from the Conservation Authority, since now they only can look at natural hazards only instead of natural heritage and ecosystem health, and also throw in the region that's lost all planning ability? Do you have adequate staff in the 2026 budget to do everything properly?
Through Chair Adams, short answer, yes. Little longer answer. With development activity slightly slowing, internally, we've been able to shift staff responsibilities off, for instance, some development activity and work more on official plan update or policy initiatives. So we're trying to stay nimble and react to the situation we're in. At this time, we think the work plan that we have can be managed by the staffing complement we have.
So from a Conservation Authority's point of view, you've got the experts in that field also to handle what they used to handle?
Through the chair, I don't know if I could answer the question in terms of a direct responsibility expertise, but certainly within our policy group in planning and development, we have environmental planners and others with similar experience that can handle incoming inquiries or applications that relate to that field of expertise.
Okay, that's good to hear, because I get concerned when they take away a lot of natural heritage, ecosystem health and everything, and looking at things on a watershed basis. Like the watersheds extend beyond Oakville, like to, you got Milton, you got, it's kind of all encompassing. It's amazing you can do that. So I'm pleased to hear that there's not going to be any holes found there. So I thank you for that.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much for the information. So, members of council, we will recess today. We'll come back at 9:30 on Thursday. We will go through the community infrastructure and community services presentations. I expect there'll be lots of questions on those because of the nature of them. But it's my hope that we'll finish around lunchtime and that you'll be free from lunchtime on